Are y'all
I've
familiar
heard it
with that?
somewhere. Yeah.
So I came across this girl that follows our Facebook page. They've got their own Facebook page, and I might actually have her on too, because they go to like voting polls and try to get people not to vote. And anyway, that he was describing what Arcist is. Basically, it's just like government. That's where the term anarchist comes from. I don't know. It's interesting. He said something too that I never that when he in Romans 13, and I never heard it put this way. And he may be right, or he may be wrong. I don't know, but he said something about what term. It's not submit, the powers. The word powers in the Greek, the way they understood it back then, like in Paul's day, they understood that to be demons.
Really?
Yeah, and I'd never heard that, and I'd listened to him. He was talking about that, and then I said, it kind of makes sense though when you think about the temptation of Jesus. That was Satan. I mean, and if he's given the power to over the worldly kingdoms, then I mean, it kind of makes sense. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but it kind of made sense to me. But yeah, that's all part of that episode too. It's gonna be interesting. Let me turn my phone down. And I just lost. There you go. Nothing. There you go.
Check 1, 2. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me check this. That's good. That's good. Okay. All righty. So I got the live set up, and so what I'll do, I'll just take a little pause here, and I'll do an introduction, and I'll get it cut for the YouTube.
I wish Quinn could edit this for us, because this is the first time I've done anything like this before. Like, she cleans our podcast up so well, you can't even tell there's any awkward pauses or me stuttering through stuff.
I like awkward pauses. I think they give character.
I'll lose my train of thought sometimes, and you can if you heard the unedited versions of our podcast, you would hear it a lot.
Well, I'll tell you what was fascinating for me when I first started doing this, because I just decided when I was doing the truck driver thing, and I never realized how many times I said it was and and it was of course I could just go in and just cut. So,
do you? How many podcasts do you have? Is it just the one, or?
Well, so basically, I started out with the truck driver thing, and then I merged it with my boss when we started our deal now. And then I just started one on Anchor called Unbeliever, and I'm going to put these, what I call ordinary conversations, I'm going to put those in that feed. My friend Michelle put me onto the Anchor, and it's so easy to use. I could literally record driving down the road, and I'll get a big Bluetooth headset, and I can record going down the road, and then I can edit it and post it, because I'll have these great revelations while I'm driving, and then I get to the end of the day and I completely forgot what it was, and it's not like I can write stuff down while I'm driving. So I'll just put that Bluetooth headset on and just talk and just let it go. And so that was kind of my pastor had asked me one time, he's like, well, what's your problem with the government anyway? And it came to me, and I went, I'm an unbeliever. It's unbelief. It's that greatest sin. It's that one unforgivable sin of unbelief. And I said, that's it. I'm an unbeliever. And so that kind of stuck. And so I went with it, and it seems to work. Cool. So, okay. So give me a second to pause. I'll do an introduction, and then we'll roll. Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ordinary Conversations. I'm your host, Chris Polk, and I've got my friends Abby and Craig with me today. They work together on the Bad Roman Project, which is one of my new favorites. They have a podcast. You can find it on all the podcatchers. And I wanted to bring them on today because I have been rattling around with this idea in my mind that essentially the state has failed. Throughout the last 5 months, as we have experienced all this together. You know, I went to a freedom rally and I met a couple of West Virginia delegates, and they love freedom, the Constitution, and all that kind of stuff. And we had the conversations. And for a minute, I was like, well, hey, what if this is the fuse, you know, that lights the new revolution? And it only took about a week for all that to fall apart. But what I noticed among my own thoughts, and as I've watched people struggle, and especially we watched it switch from I'm mad as hell that I can't go to the barbershop, and I'm going to protest, and we're going to gather at the Capitol, and we're going to let them know how we feel. And then George Floyd happens, and it just all switched. They all their cognitive dissonance just locked them up, and they're like, I don't know what to do, because you know, rioting is bad and destruction is bad, but I'm still mad about this, but I can't join Black Lives Matter, because then I'll be a liberal, you know, and they're just pulled in every direction.
Or I hate the cops when they enforce one thing, but I love them when they enforce another thing.
Right. And so I thought, okay, let's back up for a second, because in America, and this, I'm going to say this mainly pointed at Christians, but we have a set of documents that say things, okay, in the United States. And one of them says, governments are instituted among men to preserve life, liberty, and property. Well, if you say that to your average constitutional, conservative, evangelical Christian, they're like, yeah, yes. Now, I don't believe that. Even if I were to say that I take the founders of America at their word and I assign to them only noble characteristics, and I say, okay, well, yeah, they believe that. They believe that governments were instituted among men to preserve life, liberty, and property. That's over. It's been over for a long time. But after the last 5 months, it's like really, 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 really over. It doesn't exist. Now, as an anarchist, I can say that's not why government exists. Even if you want it to, it's not going to happen, because then it becomes about not preservation of life, liberty, and property. It becomes about preservation of the state. And I wanted to try to think of how do we communicate this, because right now they're loving to throw the word anarchist around like it's these numbnuts with Antifa, you know, that are blowing shit up, and they're like, oh, they're anarchists. I'm like, no, they're not even close to anarchists. They love the state. They love the state more than just about anybody else does. So I wanted to get you guys on first to kind of talk about our perspective and how we look at this stuff. Because when I see George Floyd, when I see freedom protests, when I see Black Lives Matter, I think I just view that differently than a lot of the politically entangled, as Keith would put it, you know? So let me start with Abby, because I think it's kind of important to explain to people how you become comfortable with using a word like anarchist. You know, how do you get there? Because for me, it took a decade, you know, to really, from the moment, and I know when it happened, that something clicked and there was some little fuse that was lit that began to burn me off in this direction. And so now I'll look somebody in the face and say, yeah, I'm an anarchist. I now won't apologize for it.
Yeah. I don't feel like I had like a moment, like the straw that broke the camel's back moment. I feel like it was, well, like you said, it takes years, but I feel like everyone is kind of born an anarchist. Like when you're young and like intrinsically understand property rights, that, you know, like I own myself and my stuff. Nobody has the right to touch or hurt me. And I don't have the right to touch or hurt somebody else's stuff. But then like through indoctrination from culture and from being in the school system and families and everything else, it's kind of like they build up this idea of, well, there's all these little caveats. Like, well, yes, you don't have the right to hurt somebody or take their stuff unless you're doing it for the greater good, unless you're an officer of the government, unless. And then so, I don't know, like when you kind of start realizing that the inconsistency, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, I need to reframe this and look at this a different way. And so it seemed like just like peeling back layers of cognitive dissonance, like, well, no, that caveat doesn't make it okay. No, it's still, you own yourself. Nobody has the right to hurt you, no matter what, like in any circumstance. And I think once you get to the point where you hate the state enough and really see it for all the evil that it is, that's when you're comfortable saying, yeah, I'm an anarchist, because you know you're going to get a reaction from that. People, like most people are like, I don't know what to say about that. Like,
You like throwing rocks.
Yeah, especially like before an election when people are coming around trying to get people registered to vote. That's my favorite, when they say, are you registered to vote? And I say, no, I don't believe in voting. I'm an anarchist. And they're kind of like, because obviously those people are like the most indoctrinated that you can be. And I had one lady knock on my door and ask me to register to vote. And I told her I was an anarchist. And she was like, oh, I'm an atheist. I guess those are kind of similar. And I was like, not really, but okay.
Why don't you come in? Let's talk about it.
Oh, sorry. Once you feel comfortable enough, like that no matter what somebody asks you about after that point, that you know that you have the answers for it, then you're kind of not afraid to ruffle this.
Well, and once you decide on a label that you'll accept, the minute it's out of your mouth, you lose control over it, you know, because conservatives and liberals and Marxists and socialists, well, they're all happy about it too, because what it means to them, you know. And so when you allow it to divide is part of the problem, regardless of what the label is. Oh, well, I'm one of those, but I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those people. And that to me was the biggest struggle that I had with my faith, was because there were so many judgmental jerks that loved to, well, see, he's one of those, so we can discard him. She's one of those, whatever that is. And Jesus, to me, it was very clear that Jesus did not differentiate from people, from the Samaritan, from the Jew. And his ministry was very clear about how he respected people, regardless of their label. So Craig, how about you? How did this journey begin for you, and how'd you get here?
Well, I don't remember what day it was. I just know I woke up one day and I was an anarchist. Now it started back when George W. Bush ran for office. I had no interest in politics prior to then, you know, but the more I started listening, I got a little interested in it. And then as a Christian, we're against abortion. We're Republicans speak to abortion. I didn't know what team I was on, so I went with Republicans because they were talking against abortion. What happened and then right after he was elected, then 9/11 happened, and I went full-blown neocon. I was all about the wars. We got to go kill them, or they're going to come over here and kill us some more. And that lasted until Donald Trump was elected. You know, I was pushing hard for Ted Cruz. You know, when he would say things like, "We'll turn it into a parking lot over there." You know, I was celebrating stuff like that. But then Donald Trump got nominated, and I was like, man, there's something wrong here. I cannot get on board with this guy. This guy's a scumbag. And Christians are celebrating this guy and the trash he was talking. I said, how can y'all agree with this guy? And so once he got nominated, I started looking into a third party. I was still going to vote. I was still a statist. I still felt like we got to get the right person into office. And I looked into the libertarians, got involved with some libertarian groups on Facebook. I couldn't get on board with Gary Johnson. There was no way I was going to vote for that guy either. So I started checking into the Constitution Party. The whole time this is going on, I started studying. After Trump was nominated, I started studying the Constitution, like going back to the original intent. What was meant behind it. It was important to me to know what the founders meant about the Constitution. Now, I voted for Darrell Castle because they were the only ones even talking about the Constitution. Donald Trump said in his campaign, he said the Constitution isn't always relevant. And that stuck in my head. And Mike Pence was sitting right next to him when he said it too. And he didn't even budge. And I was thinking, man, Republicans are supposed to be about the Constitution, and nobody cares. And then the more you get into it, you start realizing that no politicians don't care about their oath to office. The people voting for the politicians don't care about the Constitution. They're willfully ignorant about it. They just want to go along with the guy that's got a special letter by his name. You know, and this is 2016. 2 years later, I moved to Memphis. The whole time I'm with these in these libertarian groups, even after the election, and there's anarchists in these groups. And I kind of thought they were crazy, but I would pay attention to them a little bit, listen to what they were saying. They were actually talking about, like, I'm a big individualist guy. Like, collectivism to me is evil. Now, but anarchists were talking about that, about individualism. Now, if you could find an anarchist that wasn't a total snark, because as anarchists, we're pretty snarky anyway. Now, but if you could find one that would have an honest conversation with you, that's kind of how it started for me. You know, when I realized, I just woke up one day, I was like, I'm an anarchist. I mean, I cannot involve myself with that. And you know, the more you study anarchy, you start understanding how it goes along with our faith too. Yeah. I could put the two together. I could put anarchy and my faith in Christ together. It made sense. You know, and the more you study that, you start understanding that the early church, they were anarchists. If you go study prior to Constantine, and I've learned a lot of this just with our podcast, they were anarchists. They had no interest in being involved with government. You read some of the stuff Tertullian put out, that dude was no nonsense. And I love that. And Keith Giles, he said in that episode he did with me and Abby, he said, I hate to burst your bubble. He said, because mine was burst too. He said, but don't read anything he has to say about women because it's bad. Yeah. But as far as the state is concerned, he was spot on. And it was an easy transformation. It took a lot longer than probably Abby, obviously, but it was easy for me once I started putting anarchy and my faith together. And it was like, all right, this is it. I mean, this is where I'm at. And I'm proud to tell people I'm an anarchist. You know, people use voluntarists. I like the term anarchist because it triggers a conversation. You know, because you were talking about how they're talking about Antifa being anarchist. I'm sitting at work, Fox News is playing behind me, and they keep saying anarchist, anarchist, anarchist. I could feel the hair on my neck start to bristle. And we're on lunch break, and I stood up and I went on a 5-minute spiel about how that's not anarchy, and I told everybody what anarchy is. And people, the looks on people's faces. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when I left that room.
You'll love this. So I'm on a 2-week vacation, and part of the reason we have 5 tractor trailers and one of them had a catastrophic failure. So I went ahead and took my vacation so one of my drivers could have a job. And so he's running my dedicated route with my customers and stuff. And he told me, this cracked me up. He said that at one of the stops, they have this radio playing and some commercial comes on. And he doesn't remember what the content was, but the guy that works there, Mark, looks at my driver and says, boy, if Chris would hear that commercial, would put him on a 20-minute rant, you know, because I'm just known for just going off on this stupid stuff. I'll just throw in a quick condensed version of my journey. Mine started in 2010. I was a truck driver. I was home on the weekend. And at that time, my kids were like 1 and 4, right? And I had an opportunity to run by the house to have dinner with them. So I dropped my trailer and I took just the truck tractor over to the house. We get in the car. We drive a mile to Golden Corral. My phone rings. This is my neighbor. Hey, the cops are here. I'm like, why are the cops there? Oh, well, it's because of your truck. And I'm like, so, you know, we leave the restaurant. We go back over there and I listen to this cop tell me, well, you can't park here. And I'm like, well, I live here. And I just needed to park here long enough to see my children and my wife, because I don't ever get to see them except on the weekend. And he's like, well, you know, it's an ordinance. And basically somebody called. And I think it was the guy that called me to tell me, but, you know, I'll never prove it. And I just went off. I actually made a YouTube video. It's called An American Truck Driver Comes Unglued. It was really, really light on principle. But I just remember being so angry that this cop that's supposed to be protecting and serving is intimidating and harassing. You know, I'm like, the hell does it matter if my big truck sits in front of my house for an hour and a half? You know, why does that matter? Why does that garner a response from the police? Why do men with guns have to come to my house and threaten me and write me a citation for nothing? You know, there was no harm done. So about 2011 or 2012, I'd start breaking away from right-wing talk radio. And the only guy left was Mike Church, who was big into the Constitution, big into the founders, done all this self-published, like teaching material. And he got hooked up with Ron Paul and Tom Woods. And I heard an interview with Tom Woods. Well, you talk about getting sucked into a vortex. Just listen to Tom Woods talk for 15 minutes. And they mentioned that Tom Woods had a lecture series he had done at the Mises Institute called The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. And I pulled it up on my phone. It was like, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 lectures, him talking about American history and context. And it blew my brain off, you know? And I just went, oh my God, they're talking about nullification, and they're talking about, you know, the principles of the founders, and how Jefferson went from the guy that wrote the Declaration to a dirtbag that almost started a war, and just all this crazy stuff that I'd never heard in my life. And I was so skeptical that I went and looked it up. I'm like, well, I'm going to see if this guy's, you know, where's my phone, you know? And it was all completely accurate, and going through the Civil War and the secession and all this different stuff. So it was like these little fissures just kept breaking. And because of being exposed to these principles, I didn't start questioning my faith. I started questioning religion, because I just felt like something didn't make sense. And the church we were going to at the time, this guy it was all like bordering on mysticism, and, oh, we're going to call down to heaven and blah, 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 you know, and all this. So a guy was the son of the founding pastor, had started a church down the road. I didn't know anything about it, found it by accident, and went there twice to see his dad. And then he called me. He needed a drummer. And he was like, hey, you want to come down? I'm like, sure. And that was the first time I heard him preach. And he preached hardcore New Covenant grace. And it blew my head off. And I called my wife, and I'm like, you got to hear this. And she's like, I don't want, because he was kind of a jerk back in his old day. And he'll tell you that right now. He was kind of, you know, mixture of law and grace and all this stuff. And, but I'm just like, no, you need to come hear this. And I've told him 1,000 times that anarchy and the principles of the kingdom are one in the same. Right. And he's like, well, I'm not an anarchist. And I'm like, yet. Yeah. But that, once I got that history, context, and audience of who was Jesus talking to, what were the customs and rituals of the day, what was going on around at the time, who was he talking to, what conditions and rules were they living, all this stuff just made so much sense. So that's kind of my journey from uber neocon, like you know, cheering on the war, to starting to question. I wanted to understand economics after the 2009 crash. Dave Ramsey helped me with that. And then it was just these little breaks along the way. So when someone's like, well, how do you become an anarchist? And I'm like, well, you got an hour and a half? Because I can sit down and tell you. But it's literally 10 years of one thing leading to another. And then the final piece was hearing the message of the new covenant, and then Jesus Untangled, which I think, Abby, you're the one, somewhere along the way, somebody put me on that book. I'm 99% sure it was you. Yes, and I'm like, okay.
The way I found that book, Scott Goldman put it in the Anarcho-Christian group.
Yeah.
And he said, this book is fire. Y'all got to read this. And I looked into it. So I ordered it. It took me like, I went through it quick. Yeah. And then I got on Facebook, and I was quoting the book all through Facebook and stuff, and just really upsetting everybody.
Yeah. And there really should be two paths. If you're progressive, you should read that one last. If you're conservative, you should read that one first, you know, because conservatives need to be punched in the mouth about their idolatry. It's more less entanglement and more idolatry. The progressives need to be introduced to this kind and loving and wonderful God and gracious Jesus, and then need hit in the face with their politics. But one of them, you got to get them last, and the other one got to get them first. Because I've even seen around here, just family members and people are really in a position now they've never been in before, because they just don't trust what they're being told since all this COVID stuff started. And so it's a perfect opportunity for us. And so let me pull the train back on the tracks here. There are so many people that they're still scared, they're still confused, and they want a path. Well, what do we got to do? We got to shut this governor down, and we've got to get with this health director and the czar and whoever it is, and we got to stop them. And I'm like, good luck.
Yeah.
Because the only people they're concerned about are the ones that are going to go vote for them. Okay. In the last election, the gubernatorial election in West Virginia, 2016, 720,000 people voted out of 1.7 million. All right. So you had 720,000 people, and those are the only people that Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, cares about. He needs them to know that he is their precious Lord and Savior, that he's going to do everything that they need him to do to protect him. And then you've got this other million that are like, this guy's a tyrant and a fool, and they want a political solution, but it's not coming. You know, and I've sat here and watched as one of there's 100 delegates in West Virginia, and four of them got a lawsuit together and sued the governor in West Virginia Supreme Court. Crickets. The news media ignored it as if it didn't even happen. Not been a single mention of it. And I look at this one guy and I'm like, okay, I believe he genuinely loves liberty. He genuinely believes in the ideals of the Constitution, which is nothing really all that wrong with it. It's a good starting place. You know, it's good stuff there. You can't really deny that. But it's been dead since before the ink was dry. And you want to have a conversation with some of these folks, but they're so hell-bent on, well, we just got to vote for the right guy. Now, I would say this, Craig. I did go vote in this primary just so I could vote against the governor, you know, just so I could walk in there and say, all right, here you go, fat boy. You know, the difference is, for me, and I think your average voter, I saw that no differently than casting a vote in American Idol. I got no faith in it. I got it's not going to help me. It's not going to help anybody else. And so I don't have a problem with voting as long as it is not your only solution. You want to participate in the process, go ahead. It exists. I can't deny that it exists. It does. If you want to go participate, fine. But please stop pretending like that's the answer, because it's not. It's absolutely not an answer. So,
well, I would say to that, if nobody ever called into American Idol and voted, it would go off the air. So what would happen if nobody voted for politicians? Just saying.
Right. No, that's an absolute. That's an absolute. But I think as anarchists, we can't deny that the state exists. Right. We can say it shouldn't exist, or we can say there's 1,000 other ways to deal with problems than using the state. But we also can't pretend like it doesn't exist, because it does. And so if someone wants to go vote, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't, because that to me feels like religion, you know, and go have a ball. You know, go on down there and get your temperature took and go in there and make a check mark. But please stop believing in that's the answer. Because all I'm left with essentially right now is voluntary cooperation and association. The politicians aren't going to fix it. the people that believe in that have that faith in that system are not going to change because they're waiting. Well, I'm going to wait, and the right person will get elected, and then they'll reverse that. And I'm like, no, it's not happening, because when all this went down, my customers were ordered to shut down in Pennsylvania, and they told the governor to pound sand, and they remained open the whole time. So my life was unaffected, because all these different people, they didn't march in the streets and they didn't really advertise other than a big cardboard sign out in front that says, hey, yes, we're open. But people ordered, the plant built it, and I shipped it. And nobody held a gun to my head. So if I'm looking for a solution in this, it comes with disobedience. So how do you guys think we can use this opportunity to try to get that nugget into people? Stop waiting for the state to do what you want. Just go do it. If they shut down the baseball game, go find a field and set one up yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to talk to people where they're at. Like, I would say most of the people in my life are more on the left. So I would approach them differently than the people on the right, because it was the opposite. They were like, shut down everything more. Why aren't the governors doing more? Why are people still allowed to do this and this and this? And then now they're like, defund the police, Black Lives Matter. So it's really interesting. But I think with both aspects, you can point out, like, yeah, the government didn't have any solutions for you in this. And I think, like what you were saying, actually, people voting is a good way to kind of point out how the state has failed, because that was a big thing for me. I remember the first time I voted, I was 18, I was a senior in high school, and my dad worked for the federal government for my entire life. And so he was like so proud to teach me about democracy, and we went through all the ballot initiatives together so I could be an informed voter, and he took me to the polls before school, and it was like a big deal. And there was this one ballot initiative that was, I lived in Phoenix at the time, and if you know anything about Phoenix, Arizona, it's like this huge sprawling city. Like, they don't have like a downtown with skyscrapers. It's just spreads and spreads and spreads forever, and you can drive and drive and never reach the end of it. It's just enormous. And so there was this one initiative that said, if contractors were going to build houses or any kind of buildings, I guess, that were like off of where the grid for the city already was, that they had to pay to extend the electricity and the plumbing and everything out to where they built it, instead of taxpayers paying for it. And I was like, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. Why should I pay for you to continue to sprawl the city out? Build where the grid already exists if you don't want to pay for it. But there was, at the time, all these bumper stickers that were like, vote no on prop, whatever it was. My job and my family depend on it. So they got like the sympathy out there that, like, oh, this is going to make, if you're a contractor, it'll make your costs go up and your job harder or whatever. But I was just so like, right, but it's wrong to make other people pay for stuff that you want to do. Like, it, like, don't you get that? And so, of course, it failed. Taxpayers still had to pay for the grid to be extended out to wherever anybody wanted to build houses, any random place in the desert. And that was the first time I was like, well, this is bull. So, like, because a bunch of contractors convince people I have to pay for the sewers to be extended, like, this is how democracy works. Like, that was my first experience with voting, where I was like, well, this is kind of dumb. That doesn't make any sense. And then, like, every election after that, I think the second time Obama was elected was the last presidential election I voted in. But every time it was like I voted. And if you're really paying attention to, like, yes, this is what I think the government should do, this is what I'm voting for, and then how it never happens, even if your guy wins, then you can't help but get disillusioned with that and be like, okay, they keep telling us this is the answer, but this is clearly not the answer.
Yeah. Craig?
I want to Abby said something that makes a lot of sense. You got to meet them where they're at. So my journey to anarchy actually started with my study of the Constitution. And one thing I love about our project is we have so many different perspectives. Abby's going to be able to reach somebody that I can't, and vice versa. You know, we have other people working with us that are going to be able to reach people that we can't. Now, I could go talk to a conservative about the Constitution all day long and show them how the government has no interest in it. And if you can get people to start understanding that they're disregarding their own oath, then they start to understand that it's all like it's bull. You know, it's I don't know. I know the state exists. I know it's there, but I don't think we should prop it up either. And I think voting props it up. Now you see a lot of libertarians right now that are calling themselves anarchists running around talking about going to vote for the libertarian ticket in the national election. They know they don't have a chance of winning, but they're still going to go push for it. But in my mind, you're propping the government up that way. And as anarchists, we're trying to get the government to go away. You know, and I think you have to start like she said, if nobody ever voted on American Idol, it would just go away. You're propping it up by voting, in my opinion. And I take a hard line on it. And I know I ruffle some feathers with that. And it's just my personality, though. I don't see a whole lot of gray area. It's black. Everything's black and white to me. And so I'm pretty stubborn in that aspect. And so it's hard for me to reach somebody that like Abby's going to reach. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I can't, I don't know. I think what we're doing is for the future. The founders talked all the time about posterity. If you read their letters back and forth to each other, and what we're doing as anarchists now, we're doing for the future generations. We're not going to see it happen in our lifetime. I'm fully aware of that, but that doesn't mean we got to lay down and just let it happen. You know what I mean? So just keep talking. We got to keep talking to people. You're gonna find some people that are interested in what we're saying. I've noticed it with the Bad Roman Project. I get messages all the time through our Facebook page, you know, and in private messages on my Facebook, asking me questions. I had one last night. She said, she was like, don't get mad at me, but I have a question. I said, why would I get mad at you? It's like I said, I ruffle feathers, but she said, you're all against Donald Trump. So are you saying that Joe Biden is better? I said, absolutely not. Just because I'm against Donald Trump doesn't mean I'm going to vote for Joe Biden or support vote Joe Biden. I'm an anarchist. I think they all suck. Mm-hmm. Every one of them. I don't care if, you know, maybe Thomas Massey to a point is all right. People were all excited about Amash running for the libertarian ticket. He's done some things in the past that I could not get on board with. Rand Paul is not his dad at all. And I posted something last night, you know, he proposed a bill to stop no-knock raids across the country. First of all, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to piss some people off. That's an unconstitutional bill. The federal government has no authority to dictate what a state does, period. Now, he may have some good intentions, but that bill is dead on arrival. Yeah. The state is not going to police itself. The state is only interested in protecting the state. They have no interest in your rights. They have no interest in your liberty. They have no interest in your life, period. They are there to protect themselves. And you've seen it with this COVID-19 stuff. You've seen it with these protests. They are brutalizing these people out there. Some of the images coming across are just disgusting to me. I mean, this guy lost his eye the other day. He was walking to work and got shot in the eye with a rubber bullet. He wasn't even protesting. That old man that got pushed to the ground, that Key Giles knows, mm-hmm. He was bleeding from his ear and the cops were just stepping on over him. Didn't even try to help him.
If you watch it, after the guy pushes him down, another one like kind of starts reaching to help him up, and right. That one like blocks him, is like, no, we're gonna
right. Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's how the cops work. That's how the good apples take care of the
Well,
bad
saying
apples.
I said that the other day too, because I've tried with all that is in me to view the police as a few bad apples. There might be some good ones in there, but there's vastly more bad apples in there. And once you start putting good apples with bad apples, the goods are going to get spoiled at some point.
Yeah.
What
Well, and
it's
if the good ones are so good, they wouldn't be saying, the posts you see defending the cops are like, oh, I go and comfort people who've been in car accidents and I do this and I do that. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm sure you do things that aren't horrible sometimes. Good for you. But if you were really one of the good cops, you would take this opportunity to speak out and be like, yeah, things are like the situation right now is we can't move forward like this. Things have to change. These are the ways that I'm going to stand up to the people who are above me. I'm going to refuse to go after people for non-crimes where there's no victim. I'm going to refuse to do this. I'm going to stand up for what's right. But I haven't seen anybody saying that. I have seen them in any defense of the cops are like, well, those don't just focus on the bad ones. Everyone else is good. And it's like,
well, even the guy Anderson, the one that got fired, that from Washington, that made the video in his car and then got fired. If you go watch what he's put on social media since, I can tell you right now that dude would raid a drug house in a minute. You know, he would enforce the war on drugs, which I believe is wholly unconstitutional, wholly immoral. There's nothing good about it. There's nothing that makes me safe. It makes me less safe.
yeah.
And I remember, when after George Floyd happened, people would put up these images, statistical images. Well, the cops kill a lot more white people than they do black people. I'm like, hey, here's an idea. How about y'all stop killing people? I mean, I'm just saying, what pisses me off more than anything is the pro-life crowd is most voracious supporters of war. First ones to defend a cop. No questions asked. I mean, like Candace,
you said, it's idolatry. Like
The hypocrisy, the hypocrisy behind all this is insane. If you look at the right now, the left's talking about defund the police, and the right, the Second Amendment people, the pro-gun people, are like, no, we got to keep the cops. Why? You've got your own guns.
Yeah.
What do you need the cops for? Protect yourself. You're always talking about this, and now you're like, no, we got to keep the police departments. So we got to keep the police. No. And I heard Mike Maharrey say something one time, and he was quoting somebody else. He said, if you don't want if it's not worth somebody dying over, do not call the cops.
Right.
You call it like somebody calling the cops on you for your truck. If that had escalated, they could have shot you and got off and nothing would have been done to them. It happens all the time. There was a lady in Fort Worth. She was sitting and she just got done playing video games with her nephew. Somebody called for a welfare check because her back door was open. It was the screen or something. She heard the cops in her backyard. They shot her through the door because they got off. They murdered this woman, and there's no accountability to it. If you cannot look honestly at what's going on right now with the way the police are acting and say that something is messed up, these people are tyrants, and you've given them weapons, and you've given them full immunity to go out there and do whatever they want without cause. I'll be surprised if anything happens to those cops in Minneapolis.
Nothing.
Oh yeah.
Zero.
I'll be surprised. And when that happens, if you think what happened was bad, it's going to be far worse. I promise you. And you keep people locked down. This was bound to happen anyway. So you keep people locked down with the COVID stuff. People were getting restless. This was going to happen regardless. I was talking to a guy at work about it the other day. I said, this was going to happen, but it was that one thing that pricked the bubble. And then it exploded. You cannot lock people down. You cannot start taking away freedom. We're going to get restless. I talked with Kerry Baldwin about this on our second episode. And this is when the COVID thing was just starting to ramp up. I said, watch. I said, because you could see libertarians and anarchists trying to get out in front of it because you knew how the state was going to respond to it. but watch what's going to happen. I said, if you start keeping people locked down, people are going to get restless. And boom, George Floyd got murdered by those cops in Minneapolis. And now what? Anarchists are out there burning down buildings. No. Anarchists are trying to tell you to stop supporting the state.
That's the important thing to point out to people, whatever side they're on, is the connection and the tyranny. Because like right after, I haven't seen any recently, but so many people were posting like, you having to wear a mask is an oppression. What happened to George Floyd is oppression. And it's like, well, they both are. Can they both be oppression? Like,
yeah.
Can it not be one or the other? And I pointed out, like, it's those little things that lead up to the cops feeling like that they can just like casually with their hands in their pockets murder somebody because they can. They have total control over our lives. And everybody's been out there saying, please come down on us harder. Please make more rules and more rules and more rules.
I used to be that guy.
That kind of power, that this is what happens.
I don't know if you were, Chris, but I was that guy for a long time. I had a Blue Lives Matter bracelet that I wore everywhere.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I got some for my buddies too, man. We were proud about it. And we were, you know, and like Facebook posts, man, are embarrassing. I don't even recognize that guy anymore. I was like, that guy, who is that idiot? Oh, that's me. That's my memories.
It almost happened to my wife. When our middle son was an infant, she put the kids down for a nap. So they're like, 6 months and 2.5 or 3. And here's this banging on the door. All right. Well, listen, when she puts the kids down and you sneeze out in the front yard, she's going to come out with a shotgun. You wake those kids up and your ass is grass. Right. So somebody's beating on the front door. So she runs to the door. She opens the door and it's a cop. But plain clothes with the chain, badge on a chain. And says he's looking for somebody, and she's like, well, she doesn't live here. And he's like, well, let me see your ID. So she shows him the ID, and he figures out that, it was the people that lived there before us. And then he pulls up the little radio and says, all right, not it. And all of a sudden people start walking out from behind her. They had our entire house surrounded. I was at work, and how easily they could have just blown our doors off the hinges and killed my wife and kids. And it would have been reported, that, well, it was suspected drug activity, and that's back to the pro-life thing. It's like, you tell me you're pro-life, but with all these asterisks, unless they use drugs, unless they're a prostitute, unless they're gay, unless they're black, unless they're in Iraq or in Afghanistan,
they live in Yemen.
unless, well, then I'm pro-life. You're not pro-life. So just stop. Please stop. There's nothing pro-life about you, because when you wrap yourself up in that flag and you say, well, the government exists to protect my liberty. No, it doesn't. And so my personal opinion is, I don't feel comfort because there are cops. I feel comfort and security because of the economic conditions that I live in. The better my economic circumstances are, the more safe I am.
Yeah.
And why don't we address that? Of course, not with force, not with guns, but educating people on just basic mathematics and economics. And we run into it with our business project and our podcast, that we're just talking about like basic fundamental economics. And so here's my boss, a guy that's got 30 plus years of business experience, successful business experience. And here we are training and mentoring people that want to be self-employed. And then some jackass comes along. Well, y'all don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I'm going to go lease a $150,000 truck. And if you tell me I'm dumb, and I'm thinking, you don't know your ass from a hole in the ground, but you're going to tell me, because you saw it on television, or your buddy's buddy, and we're at this big company called Landstar, 10,000 trucks, and everybody is self-employed. And I'll have somebody walk up to me and they'll see me with a Landstar shirt, or they'll see Landstar on my truck. Yeah. And well, my buddy was, he was at Lance Star and, he didn't do no good. And I'm like, so your buddy's an idiot, right? And they don't know how to respond to that because all they know is my friend failed, so it's their fault. It's never my friend's fault. It's never my uncle's brother's sister's cousin is a moron and doesn't know how to succeed. It's always, oh, well, it's the Republicans or the Democrats or the business or the CEO. It's always somebody else's fault. And I think the state is probably solely responsible for the complete lack of personal accountability and responsibility that we're seeing. Yeah. Because why should I be accountable when the state governor said he's going to fix it? So no need for me to do anything. I mean, they're going to fix it, And so when they see someone having the audacity to say, well, maybe we shouldn't have people that work for the state with qualified immunity to kill people. Well, how dare you? Somebody will come and break in my house. I'm like, and what's going to happen if they come and break in your house? The cops going to show up 40 minutes later and shoot your dog?
Yep. Exactly. I mean, really, if anyone has ever actually been robbed or had stuff stolen out of their car, you know what a failure the police are. They don't do anything.
Yeah, nothing.
Abby said something one time on, I don't remember whatever. She's been on our podcast quite a bit, but I don't remember which one it was, but she said something that kind of stuck with me. She goes, as Christians and as Christian anarchists, we're trying to outsource what we're supposed to be doing. You're trying to outsource it to the government. These guys there's nobody good in government, I promise you. These guys are thieves, they're murderers. They do not care. I was very close before I moved to Memphis. Thank God that I got a new job opportunity. That's what brought me to Memphis. But I was very close to running for state rep in Arkansas. I was talking to, I was in serious talks with the county Republicans, was going to go up against this Democrat. He's been there for a while. Probably didn't have a whole lot of chance because where I lived was in Fayetteville was a university. It's a very liberal town. But I was going to give it a shot. It's like, and I had a friend that I've learned so much from. I would get so frustrated with him because he wouldn't show me any support for this. And this is the guy when I started talking to him about anarchy first. And he goes, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I think you have good intentions. I think you could do good with it. Maybe. He said, but you're trying to change the mafia from the inside out. That's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And the state is an organized criminal organization, period. They are criminals and people run to vote for them. I don't care if it's a libertarian, Republican, Democrat, they're criminals. They have self-interest in mind. They don't have your interest in mind. They may talk a good game. Ron Paul was probably the only one. And when he was running for president, I remember being one of those guys trying to boo him off of the stage. Because what he said goes against what Republicans are talking about. He was so unpatriotic because we weren't supposed to be over there killing people. I was like, wait, we're supposed to. They're killing. They're trying to kill us. Now, if you step back and look, our very own government is actively killing us daily. Yeah. Our government is more of a threat than anybody in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, anywhere over there that we're involved, any country we're involved, our very own government is a bigger threat to us than anybody else.
And it's my belief. It's my belief that if someone in Afghanistan is a threat, the only reason they're a threat is because of what the United States government has done to them and done to their home.
That's one thing I would boo Ron Paul about, but now I understand it. I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. I said, I know why they're pissed off at us now. We would be furious if Iran surrounded our country with bases. Can you imagine?
Oh,
we'd be going to war immediately. I used to be we have to police the world kind of guy too. We've got to make sure everybody's doing right. No, come on, let's come back home, bring the soldiers home, get them with their families, and keep them safe. Because these guys are going, they're sending them into these wars. They're coming back in caskets. They're coming back broken, maimed. The suicide rate among veterans is insane. Mm-hmm. And people talk about it, but nobody wants to understand why that's happening.
Right, exactly. Or stop it at its source. Like, I Oh gosh, it breaks my heart all the time. I know these people. I don't know if I should even share this story. I'll generalize it. So,
There you go.
Yeah, veterans who end up committing suicide, it's super, super common. But the family still is like, we support our troops. It's almost like even more. They're supporting that their reasons for going over there were valid and justified, and we're going to keep encouraging all the young people around us and in our family to go into the armed forces to honor his memory, which I just think is like, oh gosh, are you kidding me? Like, you can't see, like, no, he came back broken and damaged, and we don't want that to happen to anyone else, and it was not worth it.
When Ron Paul was running, I guess it was '08, and there was that one Republican debate, and it's kind of become that famous moment. And I've heard someone say, well, yeah, Ron Paul, he ignited a bunch of people and then turned them all into anarchists. But when he looked Rudy Giuliani in the face and basically told him to shut up, and was talking about blowback, and that was the first, and I went, maybe he's not crazy after all. Just thinking about blowback and at least being willing to question. Lots of people, they want to have the inside scoop on 9/11. Well, who really did it and how they do it, and I don't care. I don't care. I don't care any more about that than I do where the Rona came from. At this point, doesn't matter. The cat's out of the bag, y'all. Maybe it was Bill Gates. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was 5G. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was China. Maybe it was Fauci. None of that matters. And to me, if you're so obsessed with being on the right team and knowing what the truth was, you're so wrapped up in your own self-righteousness, so you can say, see, I was right. I got it all figured out, that you're blinded by self-righteousness and all these injustices that happen to minorities legitimately, that also happen to poor people of all races, that happen to people in other countries. You don't care because you're so blinded and distracted with your self-righteous desire to be correct. And you'll never get there. It'll never be proven. Never. As much as you want to, even if you say you've got the proof, it's not happening. So let it go. But I'm optimistic. I'm incredibly optimistic. And maybe that's part of what I've had such a not difficult time with all this. But when I look at decentralized markets, blockchain, crypto, the stuff that's coming, it's like standing on a shore and I see this boat, and it's so far away, you can't really tell where it's at. Is it close? No, it's not that. Maybe it's far off, but I see it coming. And I know when that sucker gets to the shore, it's over, because when, not if, when I can buy anything from anyone from anywhere, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop me. And I've got an autonomous decentralized network with an autonomous decentralized currency that I can activate on it, and all of my transactions are encrypted. Have a Coke and a smile, y'all. It's over. It's done. I can't say, well, it's going to happen next Tuesday. I don't know, but it's coming. And we're watching. This is my prediction. Y'all write this down in the red book. I believe, I could be completely full of crap, and I completely accept that. Okay. But I believe that we will see a massive explosion of decentralized autonomous networks in Africa, South America, the Middle East, even China. And that the crypto economics will begin in those places, and we'll be the last ones to get it. We just got to hope that it doesn't turn us into a third world country, because they get so rich so fast that we can't keep up, because we've all got our heads so firmly planted up our red, white, and blue rear ends that we want bigger walls and bigger tariffs and bigger exclusion. And I'm thinking, if what happened, if what ha- if I hap- if what happens the way I think it's going to happen, that was a sentence. Somebody write that down. All that stuff is meaningless. The only thing it can do is hurt us, because what anarchism and voluntarism, and especially the New Kingdom, once that sandwich was put together, I don't care where you were born.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care what your race. None of that matters to me. What matters to me is, can I serve you in some way? Is there something I can do to help you in exchange and trade with you somehow that's mutually beneficial, that doesn't screw you and doesn't screw me, regardless of where you live? That's all I care about. And the tribalism of throwing away God's children because of where they were born, or their sexual orientation, or their gender dysphoria, or whatever the big name is for it. Why should that matter? It doesn't.
Can I say something when you were
Go
talking
ahead.
about the currency? And it just popped in my head when you were talking about it. If that actually happened in other countries, do you not see our government trying to interfere with it some way to stop it?
Oh
Oh, they
yeah.
already are. His name's
Okay.
Russ Ulbricht. He's doing double life plus 40.
Yeah.
But it's, have you read any of the biographies of Steve Jobs?
No.
My brother did, and just told me that he apparently was a horrible person.
Definitely. Well, he was a jackass. Okay. But I think it should be required reading for people that like free markets, to just understand his story. Because if you set his behavior, which was about 20% of his story, if you set his behavior side, he was a visionary, like, probably in top 5 visionaries of human history. And I think he knew, like back in the 80s, I don't think he could have called it social media, and I don't think he could call them smartphones back then, but he knew when the iPhone was being developed. I 100% believe that he knew what was coming. He didn't live to see it. He died before it really grabbed a hold the way it has now. But if you go back and you look at that story where Steve Wozniak was working for Hewlett Packard on calculators, and so him and Steve Jobs developed the Apple I. And Steve Wozniak's kind of like this big child, and he's like, well, guys, technically Hewlett Packard, I work for you, so you own anything that I work on. And he tried to give them the Apple I, and they were like, well, that's the dumbest thing we've ever seen. We do calculators. We're not going to, people are not going to have computers in their homes. Have you lost your minds? But Jobs knew. Steve Jobs knew, right? So if I look at things in a kind of linear step, and you take, the invention of the microchip and the resistor, and you lay that with the computing, and then you put on top of that the internet, and then the smartphone, and then social media, and there's more steps that I don't think we're recognizing. We just look at what we have, and we're like, okay, well, I mean, hell, it can't get no better than this. But it will. And so if I have a device in my pocket that is connected to a network, and that network is encrypted, it pretty much already is. It's got a ways to go yet. But all I have to do is press a button to trade with anybody anywhere in the world, and it's completely blocked with cryptography. The state's finished. because the minute we move from their currency to our currency, good luck. I mean, how you going to tax me? You can't find it. How are you going to regulate my transactions? You can't find it. So
That's when they're going to send people with guns to your house.
well,
I'm
okay,
afraid.
but let's look. I live in a county called Putnam County in West Virginia. There's probably, let's say 25,000 people, 30,000 people in this county. There's 30 deputy sheriffs. 30 for 30,000 people. There's only 600 state troopers in the entire state of West Virginia for 1.7 million people. There's just not enough cops, not on that level. Obviously, if this all happened overnight, but I don't think it'll happen overnight. I think it's going to happen little by little. I mean, the fact that a Bitcoin that 10 years ago was worth, 0.3 of a penny is now worth $10,000. It's kind of beyond the point of dismissing it. It's kind of, we're beyond the, oh, well, that's never going to work. Well, obviously it is. So
my cynicism gets a hold of me sometimes. And I think that's my problem. I'm very cynical when it comes to stuff. And I love what you're talking about, but it's in the back of my mind,
we need the cynics though, because that keeps people like me in balance. Right. But if we spent, and probably the most reasonable criticism of anarchists is we can be a little arrogant at points too.
I get accused of it all the time. Yeah. And I don't think I mean to be. I think it's just my personality more than anything. I don't feel like I'm being arrogant, but I get told I'm arrogant all the time. So maybe I am. I don't know, but it's not intentional.
People are so distracted by media. So with media, you have their entertainment, and then you have their news. And they're all filled with messaging. They're all filled with, these cop shows. I used to watch these cop shows, and you're rooting for them to go violate that guy's constitutional rights because he's bad, and it just got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. But there's such an opportunity now to talk about economics as liberty. I'm sure you've seen the posts over the last few days. Well, you just need to know that they didn't open up these states because it's safe. They opened them up for economic. Yeah. Yes. That's exactly why we did it. I have every right to not believe what Dr. Fauci says. Mm-hmm. I have every right. And I'm not going to apologize if I don't believe everything America's top doctor has to say. I don't give a damn.
Everything that they were saying before is coming back to be false. Everything.
Right.
The masks are going to stop the virus. No, actually, they don't stop the virus. People are still running around with masks on their face. If you're immune, what was the word?
Asymptomatic.
You can carry. What's that? Yeah, asymptomatic. So if you're asymptomatic, you can still be passing the virus along. That come back, that's false too. And that's how they started all that fear. It was like, you got to stay home because you may not have symptoms, but you may have the virus and you could be passing it on to somebody else. Horse shit. Pardon my language, but it's horse shit. And it's come back to be proven to be horse shit. But people, you can go to the store and people are still running around with masks on their face. I live in Collierville, right outside of Memphis. And there's a Facebook page called Tour Collierville, and we're in phase 3 of reopening. Whatever, I don't even know what that means. I can't go to the gym right now because it's supposed to be a 24-hour gym, and I'd go after work at like 4 a.m, but they're not 24 hours right now. So I'm sitting at home eating bacon and eggs all the time, just gaining weight, and I need to get to the gym quick. Anyway, Tour Collierville put up this. We're in phase 3, and they're talking about things that are going to happen, but they said they're going to be allowed to this. And I commented, And I think people are starting to wake up to this nonsense too, because I said, is anybody else sick of hearing the word allow? We're going to be allowed to open our businesses back up.
Yeah.
Man, people jumped on that quick. I mean, I hadn't looked at it in a while, but people were commenting. They were like, yes, yes, yes. So people are getting sick of it. I have a friend that's got several restaurants in Arkansas. I told him, I said, just go open up, man. They can't do anything to you. And if you looked at how the governors were acting and how the cops were enforcing these executive orders, they should be arresting these governors and putting them in jail for what they've done, because they have violated their oath constantly through all of this. The police officers have violated, they take the same oath that the politicians do. They are violating their oath with all this. Arrest the cops, arrest the politicians, go back to work. Luckily, we were considered an essential business, so we got to go back to work. Now, had they start trying to make us wear masks, I can't wear a mask because I'm claustrophobic. It would drive me crazy. I think I got that from my mom because she's highly claustrophobic. But they didn't start making us do it. I've had friends saying where they work, they're making them wear masks. I would probably have to quit my job just because I couldn't do it. But
yeah, my husband has to wear it. He works 10 hours a day, has to wear a mask all day long to be able to go to work. And he takes issue with the essential employee label. Is like, so basically, you shouldn't call us essential. You should call us human sacrifices. If everyone has to stay home except they'll die, but you guys, it's okay. Nobody really cares if you die because we need to, buy our groceries.
Well, you can go hang out at Home Depot or Walmart, but you can't go to church.
Yeah.
Right.
Come on, man. None of this makes any sense. If you can't see how illogical this is and see how retarded it is, everything that they're doing, man, you're just blinded. And I think people are
especially now when they're like, well, stay in groups of smaller than 12, unless you're protesting, then 100 is okay.
And social distancing went out the window, by the way, when the protests started. Nobody cared about it anymore.
I've got to show y'all something. So I saw somebody shared this, a screenshot of this, and I thought it was some smart ass libertarian guy that had made this up, until I figured out that this, what I'm about to show you, is on the West Virginia legislature website, and it's their info packet. It's a PDF. So you should be able to see this, okay? But this is the West Virginia organizational chart. Can y'all see it on your screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I saw this, I thought, well, there's no way that the government has made this. This is some libertarian with a sense of humor that's made this. No, the citizens are at the top, right? And you got the three equal branches: judicial, executive, legislative, and then you got your little flow chart, right? And when I looked at this and thinking, surely this is a joke. This has to be a joke. This isn't real. But this is literally on the West Virginia legislature website, and everybody has got it upside down. Because Governor Jim Bob thinks, Buford T. Justice thinks that I'm down at the bottom somewhere in his organizational chart. And because you said one of you said allow. And I'm thinking, gosh, that's such an interesting word. Allow. That son of a bitch don't allow me to do nothing. I'm nowhere in his organization. It just doesn't happen,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but have you noticed, and I've had this conversation with several conservatives. I hate calling them conservatives because they're not. If anything, Democrats have gone commie and Republicans are socialists. They just don't understand. They don't realize it. Anyway,
yeah.
They wanted the conservatives that I talked to want to say, yeah, it's all happening in Democrat states. Man, I'm from Texas. That's a Republican government down there. And Governor Abbott constantly uses the word allow. We're going to allow sporting events to start happening. We're going to allow music to start, live music to come back. No, you don't have that authority to take it away from us at all.
No.
But people have laid down and let them get away with it. And like I told y'all earlier, at some point this was going to happen. It didn't have to be somebody getting murdered, but at some point people were going to get sick of this shit and just start protesting. I mean, the suicide rate in Tennessee, when the suicide rate was higher than COVID deaths in Tennessee. And it all started spiking after they started getting locked down. They didn't know when their next paycheck was coming. There was a couple teachers close to where I live. They have kids. They both killed themselves. It's sad. And
It's inexcusable.
It breaks my heart because everybody's job is essential to them. Don't tell me my job's essential when somebody else's isn't.
Yeah.
You know, that's how they feed their families, man. I mean, you're going to cut us a check for $1,200. That barely pays my rent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't even get $1,200, by the way. It was $903. I don't even know how they figured that one up, but then you're going to bail out all these corporations, trillions of dollars. Come on, man. You're going to give me $1,200. Give me $1,200. You've already stolen that money from me anyway.
Right. Right. That's what I was saying. Like, if they really cared, how about they just stop charging payroll taxes?
Exactly.
How dare you? Why do you hate little children and puppies?
Right. Why don't you want to take care of the needy?
The thing, and I think about like what this has done to our kids. Like, obviously, my kids are in public school, which I always sigh when I say that. But I've left it. I started them in public school before I was an anarchist.
Statist.
It's up to them. Yeah. But so them like not going to public school every day, I'm like secretly super happy about. But it's not like I can take them to museums or to go bowling or to see their friends. I was really surprised, but like all of their friends' parents are super strict about social distancing. They like haven't seen other human beings they haven't like even left our house in months, except for us like going camping and stuff. And it's just like, you think about like, yes, everybody's life has been shut down. How long has it even been now? Like 5 months? Like, yeah, for us, it's like I can get through 5 months, but when you're a kid, like that's a huge chunk of your childhood to not have any friends, to not be able to leave your house. Like, oh my gosh, what is this doing to them, like psychologically, you know? I really hope, fingers crossed, that they're seeing this as like the government took away my childhood, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. Like when I grow up and seeing it for the evil that it is.
And I think that was their huge miscalculation. I mean, dude, they shut down the most well-organized, well-funded indoctrination system in the history of man.
Right.
You know?
So the government schools aren't essential anymore.
Right. And so
I knew that already.
That was unessential.
You know, my kids have always been homeschooled, so they've never been in government schools. So I think on one hand, they kind of feel ripped off because, you know, that's like, well, our lives didn't change any. But like my pastor, we're talking and he's telling me that his son and all of his friends are not buying it, you know, and they're meeting secretly. You know, they're not making a big show out of it, but they're hanging out and they're going places. And here in Southern West Virginia, there's a big ATV kind of park called the Hatfield Mccoy Trail. And the first thing that Buford T. Justice did was put on the flashing lights, the signs on the interstate. The Hatfield Mccoy Trail is closed. And I'm thinking, you think you're going to keep rednecks and hillbillies out of the woods? I mean, you don't think that if we can't go to the government approved trail, we're not just going to go out the back door and up some gas well? It's just illogical. And when you think about, if you can accept that the only people that matter to Governor Cuomo, to Governor Wolf, to Governor Justice, to Governor Beshear, to Governor DeWine, the only people that matter to them are the voters. Why would they give a shit what I think? You know, I mean, they're not going to like when Karen and I went to vote, you know, we just went in there and I just, you know, I went and I voted against the governor and a bunch of other stuff I didn't know and skipped a bunch of it. Well, it got to the Putnam County Sheriff and there was 2 choices. And I'm like, I picked one. And after I got out, Karen's like, well, I picked the other. And I'm like, well, that's fine. We canceled each other out. So it doesn't matter. But if the rest of us will understand that we can, okay, my kids aren't in organized sports, so I can't really run off at the mouth about this. So I can empathize if your kid is in travel ball or baseball and basketball. I can empathize that your whole deal's been turned upside down, right? But y'all, there was a time when we didn't have the organization, but kids still got to play baseball. Yeah. So maybe what this will do is bring down some of those hierarchies that might need to come down anyway. And the kids will just go play backyard sandlot ball, you know. And this one lady's like, well, I mean, how's my kid going to get seen by the scouts? I'm like, okay, number one, your kid's not playing in the NFL. Okay. Your kid has a better shot at getting struck by lightning than playing in the NFL. Okay. So that's just a statistical fact. So calm down, Karen. But like, I love racing. I love NASCAR racing. Right. And there's been this angst over the last few years that local short tracks are suffering because people don't go to the local short track because they can watch NASCAR in high definition. Well, now they can't watch NASCAR. And now the local speedways, like Ace Speedway in North Carolina, that opens up and says, well, this is a peaceful protest. So they had 4,000 people there over, you know, the 25-person limit. People are going back to the local short track. Maybe people will start going to the local football game, the local basketball game, maybe we don't need to watch Chris Stapleton in a 30,000 seat theater. Maybe we need to watch him in a 500 seat. You know, it's, what if this is an opportunity?
I love that perspective on it. And I think out of this, there's so much good that could happen from school getting shut down, that the teachers have had an opportunity to do things in creative ways, and for the government to not be forcing them into this or that. But I think also, and I don't know how to view this in a positive light, I guess, but like, we've come to a point in our society where kids are so controlled. I forget what I was listening to about this, but it was like, people are so, give kids a hard time for being on social media so much or being on their devices so much, but they literally have nowhere in their life where they don't have adult supervision and can just interact with kids their own age without somebody monitoring and policing that. And I think, like, I tend to be a lot freer with my kids, and I'm kind of like, you know, if you get hurt, you'll learn a lesson, or, you know, I want them to like go out and explore and do whatever they want, and you know, be back by dinner time. Like, I think that's kind of looked down on, that's how it was when we were kids. That our parents didn't know where we were all day long, but it's like, well, we learned a lot of valuable stuff then, and we were responsible for ourselves, and we weren't looking for who's going to be in charge or who's going to tell me this is okay to do. And I think we've lost that for the kids of our kids' generation. And
I'm a huge sports fan.
BS on you, so you have to be careful.
I'm a huge sports fan, and I remember when this started because I took some time off work. The NCAA basketball tournament was getting ready to start. The conference tournaments were starting, and I took off because I wanted to watch Arkansas play. I'm a big Razorback fan. Now, Arkansas played, I think they played Vanderbilt in the first round. They beat Vanderbilt. The next day, they shut the tournaments down. I mean, I had a whole weekend planned to watch the basketball. That's all I was going to do. I was going to sit in front of my TV, have some beers, and watch some basketball. And they shut it down the next day. I got back to work, and people were like, how would that basketball tournament turn out for you? It's like, shut your face. I'm so upset. But, you know, I'm a big NFL fan too. But I've kind of gotten to the point now, it's like, if we don't have football, we don't have football, whatever, because I'm really irritated with the way they handled this. Mm-hmm. They did this to themselves. I don't want to hear professional athletes bitching about not getting their salaries right now. If you haven't had enough money to save to get through this, I don't want to hear it because you got people out here killing themselves because they can't go to work.
There will be football. There are way too many armed Alabama fans for there not to be football.
I saw a friend of mine post. He goes, "Can you imagine this happened right in the middle of football season? The South would be on fire."
No. Alabama fans would have led. They would have that wasn't happening. To something Abby said, I remember 1985. We moved from the country into town, and so from 0 to about 9 years old, I was by myself out in the country, and then I move into town, and I've got all these paved streets, and so my mom and dad never knew where I was ever. I'd come home when I got hungry or hurt, one or the other. And I'd get on my bicycle and I pedaled 100,000 miles in the town of Hurricane, just going out exploring and meeting new people. And I've really struggled with that because even as confident as I am, I've got that thing in the back of my mind. It's like, I don't know if I want my kids to do it. I know my wife sure as hell wouldn't let it happen, Okay. But why is that? Well, if you break that down, there's a perception because of the 24-hour news cycle that if something happens bad to a kid 2,000 miles away, it's right in your face, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we got stranger danger. We got all of this constant barrage of fear-based propaganda. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, citizen. Look at all these examples of what's happening. But the reality, I think, and this is probably what we should be hammering on, is that instances of actual crime, like you said earlier, where there is an actual victim, well, that's way down. Okay. But because the state needs there to be criminals, there has to be the bad guy for them to go after.
Legitimate.
Right. So they create
afraid of.
They create more and more and more crimes. They just with the pen, oh well, hey, here's a whole new class of criminal. Here's a whole new class of felon, and they create more criminals when there's actually less danger, and then if there is danger, it's getting killed by a cop, right? That I statistically speaking, I have more, especially as a driver that spends all of my time on the highway. I'm statistically more likely to be killed by a cop than almost anything else, just because of proximity. And we have allowed, this is the royal we, just everybody, we have allowed these news organizations to just constantly blanket us in fear. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can't escape. Well, I can escape it. I escaped a long time ago when I turned this shit off.
Yeah.
But it's constantly that their response is, oh, well, I don't know. I mean, well, I don't know if we should. I'm like, yes, go be free. Don't stop.
I think that's the main you have to turn the TV off. When you were talking about earlier, when you said, how are we going to get there? Turn the damn news off first.
Yeah.
I think the media is probably the biggest culprit behind all this. They're obviously working for the government, depending on what side you're on. You've got Fox on one side and excuse me, CNN on the other side. So just turn that shit off. It's garbage. Mm-hmm. Mainstream media is the worst thing that you could listen to because they're so slanted in one direction and it's all about the government. And you're hearing it even right now.
And they make their money off of us being afraid too. And they make money off of there being war, and they make money off of people dying. Like, that's just the way it is. That's their incentive. And I think in broader terms, letting go of fear, which turning off the news is a big part of letting go of the fear, but both with statism and religion, like that is the hugest thing that keeps you indoctrinated in that, of what you're afraid of. And it makes you, the decisions that you make out of panic and out of fear are the ones that are going to hurt other people, and the ones that kind of keep yourself enslaved too. And like, I think what you were saying earlier, if we're getting back to like the state has failed, what's next? Of letting go of the fear makes you let go of the idea that somebody needs to be in charge. And that's when the innovation can happen. Like you were talking about with Bitcoin and like with the iPhones and stuff. There's so much that could be so much better that we can't even imagine because we're so busy regulating against things that we're afraid of. I think it's so funny. Like if you watch movies like that were made in the 80s that were set in the future or like today, like they all had video phones. Like that was their imagination of the future, but they're all still like stuck to a wall. Nobody imagined cell phones at all because, and it's like, that's exactly, you can't centrally plan an economy because without any incentives, you can't think of the next thing that everybody's going to want. And it's the same thing with, what was I going to say? I don't know, just a lot of those movies, the way they imagine the future. Oh, I was thinking of Men in Black and how they were saying it's supposed to be set in the future and the next thing was going to be mini CDs, but they never envisioned like MP3s and like streaming music and stuff like that. It's like when there's the freedom and there's the incentives, like it's almost like beyond your wildest dreams what the market can come up with. And if you just imagine like, oh my gosh, what if healthcare wasn't regulated and like procedures could be better at the same rate that computers have gotten better and can be cheaper at the same rate that computers have gotten cheaper. Like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how much better off we would all be. It's
You're
crazy.
talking about movies. When I was still stuck in my statist ways and just focused on one path as a Republican, did you ever see the movie Idiocracy?
No, I've been.
You need to watch it. It's
now
the first time I watched it, I was like, this doesn't even make any sense. I don't even get it. Why is this funny? And now when I watch it, it's hilarious because I get it now. I mean, when it's like talking to other people that are still ingrained with that status mentality, it's what that's what this movie's about. It's hilarious.
It's a documentary. Anyway. Is what it is. It's
a
documentary.
Exactly.
It was written
Sadly.
about the future.
Sadly.
We showed our kids, we got my kids and their cousins together, and we've been going back and showing them old movies like Princess Bride and Back to the Future and all these old movies. And I wondered how they would respond when we watched Back to the Future 2 when they went forward to 2015, which was 5 years ago, and all those stupid outfits. But I think they kind of got it. It's like all you can do is guess. You have to look at what exists now. Well, and they made that movie in like 1987, I've got a 1987 pickup truck sitting in my driveway. In 1987, there's no way you could have foreseen the internet and smartphones. I always tell this one on myself. My sister had a friend that bought the very first iPhone that came out. It was like $650, no subsidy. And I had seen like a television commercial for it. And I looked at it, I held it in my hand, and I walked away saying, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Nobody needs a phone that'll do all that. I've got a Motorola Razr and it's awesome. And it's all I need, and now my entire business runs through my phone,
Do you remember having to text where you had to hit the number 2 or 3 times to get to the letter you wanted to?
Oh,
can you imagine if we went back to that?
No.
I don't even want to think about it. We're so spoiled.
I love, well, let me give you a Steve Jobs story. So, he heard that was it Spielberg? No. Who's the guy that did Star Wars? George Lucas. George Lucas was going through a divorce and he needed some money quick. And so either he calls Steve or Steve finds out that he's got this animation studio that he's working on. He needs to unload it. So Steve buys it. Steve looks at it and they're making these little computer animated videos and he's just basically having to fund it out of his pocket, hundreds of millions of dollars just because he doesn't want it to die. He thinks it's cool. And they keep making little things. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's cute. You guys keep working on it. And they keep working on it. All the while, he's having to pull money out of his own pocket, and he just doesn't want to let it die. It's freaking Pixar, and it made him a billionaire. Okay, so, well, people shouldn't have that much money. Okay. But see, if Steve didn't have that much money burning a hole in his pocket that he just wanted to go throw a few $100 million at something and then keep funding it because he's like, I don't know what it is, but it's cool. And it's not cool enough yet, obviously. But then he nurtured that and they made Toy Story, and boom, the whole world changes again. So Steve Jobs changed the world like 4 times with the personal computer. Then he changed the music industry, which they weren't real happy about it. And he basically walks in and says, your business model's changing. I know you don't like that, but we're going to put your music on iTunes and people are going to pay 99 cents a song. And they're like, well, we sell albums. And he's like, not anymore. You don't, and he drugged them kicking and screaming. So he changed computers, he changed music, then he changed personal communication, then he changed digital animation. And it was because he was so stubborn that once he got a hold of an idea, and I think that goes to what you're talking about, Abby, without people being free to experiment with those ideas. And yeah, sometimes we need people that are stupid rich that can blow money on stuff that I can't. I can have a cool idea, but I've got like $37 to invest. It's just not going that far, But if I had 37 million, that I could go possibly do something great or crash and burn. And a lot of wealthy people, they don't ever get credit really for the stuff that they invested into that crashed and burned, but they were able to take a nugget out of it and take that nugget and then go build something great.
Right. Or even just the people rich enough to buy the first iPhone that it enabled the company to keep going, to make more iPhones, to eventually make them cheap enough for everybody. Like there's the people that are like the first, I forget what you call them, like the first actors that jump on the new thing, even though it's really expensive. And because they're buying it, it eventually gets to the point where it can benefit everybody.
I've never understood that argument, why people are evil because they have a bunch of money. Even before I got into any politics or anything, I remember telling a friend of mine, he was a Democrat at the time, but he was like, and this is maybe around the time I started voting, I guess, but he was talking about how the right was all about the rich and protecting the rich. And I said, why do you care if they're rich though? What's it? Why does that bother you so much? I don't know. You could suck them dry by taking all their money. If people think you can tax the rich enough to cover all these government programs, that's not going to happen. First of all, they'll probably just start moving out of the country where their money's protected. So you've lost that source right there because you're trying to tax them. But don't think the Democrats are any different than the Republicans when it comes to the rich. They all protect each other in some way.
I think to a certain extent, like being rich these days, like if you have a big company, for it to be successful, you have to have the government in your pocket. So I think in a certain sense, it's justified in that everybody knows that like really to be successful in this country, you have to have some kind of government corruption going on. But I think also the bigger part of it is just not understanding economics, thinking that there's a fixed pie, that because this person has a bigger slice, I have to have a smaller slice, rather than understanding that with economic freedom, we just make the pie bigger and bigger and we all get richer together.
I think there's a reason God has not allowed me to be rich, because I would do something completely stupid with it. I promise you. I would probably hurt myself in some form, some fashion. And there's a reason why I'm not rich. I make enough money to survive. That's where God has got me. He's got me. This is all you need right here.
I can give you an example from my industry. In 2000, I guess it was 2003, the Bush administration, EPA under Bush put in these EPA levels, 2007, 2010, 2000, see, 2004, 2007, 2010. And it started in 04. They just put exhaust gas recirculation on diesel engines. And then 07, they had to put on diesel particulate filters. And then 2010, they had to put on selective catalytic reduction, which is they have to burn the special fluid called diesel exhaust fluid. The second level didn't get implemented until Obama was president. And when the second level was implemented, all hell broke loose in the trucking industry because these trucks wouldn't run. I mean, you go pick them up at the dealership, go 10 miles down the road with them, they just quit and just best of luck to you. So it was all Obama, Obama, Obama. I'm like, number one, it started with Bush. Nobody cared. So 2013, I leased one of these trucks. I leased a 2011 Peterbilt. And in 7 months, that truck cost me $50,000. Just about lost everything we had. So I went and bought a 2007 truck that had EGR. And the guy that's with the leasing company, he's like, well, let me get you another truck. No, I'm done. I'm done. No more of these trucks for me. I called the dealership. I said, what's the oldest truck you got? She said, 07 Freightliner. I said, I'm on my way. I went down there. I picked it up. I grabbed that truck. I made about $75,000 in that truck in like 3 months. It was awesome. I just killed it. Okay. So fast forward through a bunch of up and downs. In March of last year, we got a phone call from a driver who was broke down and she couldn't afford to fix her truck. So we cut a deal with her and we said, look, we will hire you. We'll fix your truck. Just give us the truck. So she agreed to that. So essentially we got this 2010 Freightliner for $3,500, right? And it was an experiment. We're going to be like, okay, we would never buy one of these trucks, but we'll give it a shot. You know, just maybe we're wrong and we should experiment with this. So here's an opportunity. I'm getting ready to haul that truck to a junkyard because it experienced a failure 2 weeks ago and it's going to be $20,000 to fix, right? My boss is literally driving back from Florida right now where he went and bought a 20-year-old Volvo for $9,000 that we are going to make a killing with, right? So here's a 10-year-old truck that already has so many obsolete parts on it that part of this cost, we got to retrofit this and retrofit that because these parts aren't available. Okay, so the experiment's over forever. We made a profit on this truck, but at this point, we just like, no, I'm not doing it. Okay, so said all that to say this. In the trucking industry as a whole in the United States, 85% of every truck is owned by a company that has 6 trucks or less. Okay. So small business is the backbone of the freight system in America. 15% of the trucking industry capacity is trucks with companies with 10,000 and 15,000 and 20,000 trucks. All right. If you're ever in Phoenix, you've probably seen Swift Transportation, big white trucks with blue letters. Okay. When the government puts emissions regulations on trucks that makes them almost impossible to operate, who benefits? The 85% 6 truck company or the 15% 20,000 truck company? Because if truck breaks down, the 20,000 truck company, well, here's another truck, here's another truck, here's another driver. We'll just keep going. But somebody like us, I can't take a $20,000 hit every 6 months on a repair, and so the way I see it is entangled corporations will work with the state to come up with these grand ideas and, we care about the environment and we're concerned about you, citizen. And they come up with all this horse shit. And they know I cannot go pay $150,000 for a new truck and then have it sit in the dealership waiting on parts for 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. But what I can do is go buy a 20-year-old non-compliant truck for $9,000, put a driver in it, and make not only my driver can make a great living, I can make a great living. And so my personal truck that I drive has 1.8 million miles on it,
Holy
and I
cow.
never have to, I don't worry about this truck at all. But here's this one that's 10 years old. That's basically a boat anchor. It's completely worthless. And so people say, well, you don't care about the environment. Not true. Okay. I just don't believe that the state is the answer.
Right. Everything they touch, they screw up.
Right.
That's
And
why I love
so
Ghostbusters.
one more little caveat. Okay.
Ghostbusters.
They're so fast, or they're so stuck on like fuel mileage and all this stuff, to save the environment. We can take an old like 97 model to 2003 model truck and do like $8,000 worth of modifications to it and get it to get 10 miles to the gallon. Okay. Back in when those trucks were new, fuel was $1 a gallon, so nobody gave a damn. Just 90 miles an hour. Why that? So we didn't care, right? We get 5 miles a gallon, didn't matter. Fuel price goes up, all of a sudden the market responds. Fuel jumped to $4 a gallon, and people are like, okay, how do I make this truck more efficient? Well, they change the gears, they change tires, aerodynamics, a little bit of modification, and boom, the fuel mileage on these trucks doubled. How can you not tell me that if the manufacturers, Freightliner, Volvo, Kenworth, Peterbilt, Mack, had been left alone to make their trucks more efficient for their customers, that it would not have also been better for the environment?
Oh yeah.
So that's my soapbox.
1.8 million miles. That's insanity.
On the original motor.
I hate driving. When I go back to Northwest Arkansas to visit my family and friends, it's a 5.5 hour trip, and I hate it. Once I get out of Memphis and past Little Rock, it's not too bad, but yeah, I just don't like the trip. Just don't like driving. I can't imagine 1.8 million miles though.
Yeah.
It takes a special kind of person to want to sit behind the wheel of a vehicle that long, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah.
I would make a terrible trucker, by the way.
Well, I've always told
me on
people,
the side of the road a lot, sleeping probably.
I've always told people driving a truck and driving a car are two completely different things. Cars put me to sleep. Big trucks, I can drive 500-600 miles a day and it doesn't bother me. But drive 45 minutes in a car and I'm ready to go to sleep. So it's a different experience. But people. It goes back to the government school system. The fact that people don't know the difference between a law and an executive order. Executive orders don't apply to me. Laws technically do. To at least to the extent that a guy with a gun can observe my behavior and say, that's against the law, citizen. And I can say, okay, they voted on it. That exists. But executive orders literally do not apply to me in any way. They're completely made up.
Try telling that to the police officers that are running around shutting businesses down,
right?
Because the governor gave an executive order.
Right.
They're following right along with. And the citizens, if people were smart enough, if they just took it doesn't take that long to understand the Constitution. You can do it pretty quickly. If people would just take a little bit of time to understand it, they would be calling these governors out left and right on what they're doing. But they just all follow along. Just it is what it is, We have to obey the government.
And I don't. What bothers me, and Keith really helped me with this. What bothers me with entangled Christians is that they conflate the Constitution as a holy document, as if it's the Bible. Well, it's not holy. The founders were not holy. They were not righteous. They were some guys that had some good ideas and also had some really horrible ideas. Have you ever heard of Renegade History of the United States by Thaddeus Russell?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds familiar.
Oh, it's fantastic because it goes back through history and it shows you really that the people that were protecting our freedoms were the renegades. They were the slaves. They were the hookers and the drag queens and the homosexuals and the Jews and the bootleggers and people that just continued to break the law were the ones that we actually owe our freedoms to. So if you want to burst into tears and thank somebody for your service, go find a drag queen, and just fall apart right in front of them and say, oh, thank you for your service, because it was them. It was the disobedient slaves before the Americans, or throughout the American Civil Rights movement. It was the drag queens and homosexuals. It was the what was it called? Bollywood, the Jews and the immigrants, if not for that's what really drives me crazy about people that get so locked up in their worship of the state, that all of a sudden somebody was born on the other side of some arbitrary line is somehow wrong or bad, when if not for the immigrants, I think we would be living now in a worse condition than people under the British Crown. But because really the founders were kind of trying to put us back under a representative form of the monarchy, but they loved control. They loved that rule of law. That's why they came into a place that was essentially lawless, where the early colonists were mixing races, and there was open homosexuality, and there was taverns and bars everywhere. And they come in and I was like, well, look at all this lawlessness and debauchery. We need to fix this. And I'm thinking, no, you probably should have left them alone, because they were a hell of a lot more free than we are.
Oh yeah.
Well, if you look at the Constitution and you look at some of the people that signed on to, there's several of them that refused to sign on to the Constitution too.
Yeah.
Patrick Henry is probably one of my favorites of all the founders, because he refused to sign it. He said, this is going to create something that we don't need. And he didn't understand why they were trying to change the Articles of Confederation. Just leave it alone. And so, but you got like, James Madison was pretty good when he was with Thomas Jefferson. He was okay, but once he got in with Alexander Hamilton, he went off the rails, But I don't know. It's still government. So did you see you were talking about NASCAR earlier? They banned the Confederate flag at NASCAR events. Yeah. I shared a post yesterday, and I cracked up probably for 20 minutes because it says Republicans are mad because NASCAR banned a Democrat flag. And I laughed so hard at this, because if people look at that and then think, man, it's idiocy.
Yeah. Well, and virtue signaling has become a pastime. I mean, it's if I had artistic skills, I would dress up some superhero and call him Captain Virtue Signal and have him fly into different situations. But, as much as I've always loved NASCAR, with NASCAR comes just off the charts patriotism, Yeah. And I went to the Coke 600 in 1998, and I heard the backstory about this about a month ago. But we're sitting in the stands before the race, and I hear helicopters, and here come these giant military helicopters that basically come and invade the speedway. They had a little mascot, I think it was called Lugnut. And so these guerrillas come in and they kidnap Lugnut and they take him to the back of the speedway. And here comes the helicopters and guns. And dude, they're blowing up buildings, giant fireballs. What I found out about a month ago was the promoter never told anybody. He didn't tell NASCAR. He didn't tell the media. He told nobody. He called some general buddy of his and he goes, y'all did some invasion of Grenada, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's a mock exercise. Come on over to the speedway before the race. Never told anybody. Dude, the whole place is invaded with helicopters and bullets and guns and tanks. Of course, it was cool. Well, then 9/11 happens. And I was at Charlotte Motor Speedway when we had Afghanistan. Like, we were late getting to the track, and I'm looking, and the green flag should have already been. And I'm getting my scanner, and I'm walking through, and I hear, and over the PA announcement, Humpy Wheeler grabbed it, and he's like, we just hit Afghanistan. And the whole place went nuts. And so it's almost gotten to the point where I can't watch the pre-race because it's so the worship of the state is just so pervasive, and the guys get out of the car and, oh, well, we got to thank the troops, because if it wasn't for the troops, couldn't drive this race car, and I wouldn't have all these millions of dollars, and I wouldn't have the sponsorship. So thank God for the troops. And of course, then they have to thank the healthcare workers now. And I'm like, well, what happens if they thank the wrong virtue group? If you thank the troops before the nurses, or the nurses before the troops, like, are you going to get in, like, how's this going to work? So it's out of control. But I think it comes down to, close with this. We have an opportunity to give people an alternative. As anarchists, yes, but more so as citizens of the kingdom, and we've got an uphill battle. I think it would be easier to convert people to anarchists than it would be to a true interpretation of the kingdom, because it's been so maligned, so much worse so than even government, because people believe that war and Jesus are like one and the same. And it's terrifying that the life and teachings of Jesus have been so twisted by religion, that's the biggest battle I think that we have. But we've got the best example in all of history, of someone who won every battle with love and compassion and understanding and patience and everything that the state isn't. So it's a great opportunity to show people. We can even use the Constitution, like Craig was saying. Well, just read it. I mean, it's not gonna bite you. Just read it.
It's a piece of paper.
It's a piece of paper. They haven't used it for a long time. It's not going to hurt anything.
It needs somebody to talk to. It's lonely.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm thankful for people like my pastor who has really embraced, but he had to go through some stuff in order to get there. Mm-hmm. But with people like Keith Giles out there, just we have the greatest opportunity in the history of man. I think it's hard to do it without hurting people's feelings sometimes, because sometimes when you my pastor, I don't know where he got it or if he made it up. He said, the truth will make you mad before it makes you free, and
I was talking with Abby about that, something similar too, because with our project, I'm more concerned with our message being consistent than I am hurting somebody's feelings.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not intentionally, and I've had people tell me this with what we're doing. We're kind of in your face about it. We're going to love you, but we're going to tell you the truth. And if it hurts your feelings, my intention is not to hurt people's feelings, but I have to stay consistent with what we're trying to do, because if it hurts people's feelings, it hurts people's feelings. I have no control over that. If I'm telling you the truth, it's the truth.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed too, like this is years ago. My mom tells me she goes to a funeral, and this lady that was, known me since I was a little boy. She tells my mom, she says, "No, I read everything Chris puts on Facebook." And my mom's going, "Oh God." But see, I would have never known that. She doesn't like, she doesn't comment, she doesn't share. Okay, y'all have heard that a bunch from people. Oh yeah, I read everything. So maybe what we have to understand is that the opportunity is not to influence the idiot that you're engaging. It's to influence the people that are driving by that'll never know that you're there. The
remnant.
I've got an Obama bot that I've been friends with on Facebook for 10 years, and he will not delete me or block me, and I've tried like hell. But if any one of my friends will engage with him in any way, he blocks them immediately. But for whatever reason, he keeps me around, because everything's a Republican plot. And I mean, it's just, it's hysterical. And he calls me a right wing snake handling Trump Billy. I'm like, you understand that I didn't vote for Trump and I'm an anarchist. But in his mind, if you're not for Obama or Biden or Hillary, you're for the other guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you're Trump's your savior. And I'm like, no, he's not. But I'm able to give him enough rope to hang himself to where it'll come up in some random conversation that, like, my brother-in-law will be here and is like, well, I saw what that idiot posted again, or he'll see something that I post that he knows is bait for Terry. I'll put it up there just because I know the minute he rolls across it, it's going to trigger him and he's off. So we can use some of those people against themselves,
Well, it
That's
does
probably
work
not mine.
because we get messages from people that aren't engaging in conversation. I do. I don't know if Abby does, but I get messages that aren't engaging in the conversation or the debate on Facebook, but they're paying attention.
Yeah.
And one of the things I struggle with, because I can be a snark, like I could go off the rails being snarky, and I try not to be. I'm trying to be as positive as I can, but man, they make it difficult sometimes. They really do. I mean, it's hard not to call out the idiots because it's what it is. And sorry if that hurts people's feelings, but man, some of y'all are just idiots.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to be an idiot.
Well, and I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is, I can say that I listen to 16 hours of talk radio every day, and that, I mean, you think about, I've driven 3.5 million miles in my career, and you think about starting your day at 6 a.m. with right wing talking radio and then going to bed with it at 9 o'clock at night. I've heard it all. You repeating what you heard on Fox News yesterday is not news to me. I've heard it all before. So maybe I'm telling you, I have a little bit different perspective. So why don't you shut up for just a second and stop repeating what Sean Hannity told you, and let's have a conversation where you're not just shouting me down. I had a relative do that to me years ago. I was going to vote for Ron Paul. Must have been 2008. Relative I hadn't seen for a long time. And she's like, so who are you going to vote for? And I was like, well, I was thinking about Ron Paul. And she's off to the races. Well, he, this, and it's going to take away from the vote. And why would you? And I'm trying to answer. And every time I get 5 words out, they start talking over me. And I finally said, if you'll shut up for about 3 seconds, let me at least finish a sentence. If you really want to know, you don't want to know. That's the problem. You just want to shout at me like Sean Hannity does, or Mark Levin, and scream at me and call me a liberal.
Oh, that guy. I think I'm going to have to unfollow him on Facebook. But man, when we were talking to Keith Giles, I do the same thing with the Franklin Graham post. I just want to get on there and be snarky, because if you get on there and you see the worship of the state from Franklin Graham and all those Christians on there worshiping the state. I went on there one day. I said, y'all need to read Keith Giles' Jesus Untangled quick.
I've done that a few times.
This is
and
insanity how y'all acting.
I'll tag Keith in it every time.
Yeah.
There's one page called Discern, DISRN, and it was started by the guy that founded the Babylon Bee and then sold it. And so it's very right-wing evangelical, them and Matt Walsh. And I follow them so I control them.
Yeah.
Matt Walsh had one, I don't know what it was. It was something about police. And so I took it was a little picture of Danny DeVito where it normally says he's got the guns, and it said, so I started blasting, but this one's got boots and it says, so I started licking. And, Matt Walsh, do you know who he is?
I think so.
Yeah.
So years and years ago, he kind of came up out of nowhere with this blog, and he was at a homeschool convention that we went to in like 14, and he had just popped onto the scene, and he was so interesting and just such a great writer. Well, Glenn Beck hired him, and it was over. He went full tilt neocon, alarmist.
Very anti-gay.
Oh, yeah. And I think it was you that wasn't somebody posted something in the narco Christian group the other day about gays, which I had to put the obligatory guy leaning back with the popcorn gif because I knew it was coming. And maybe it was you that said you were affirming, maybe.
Yeah, I said that.
Okay.
I missed this one.
Oh, it was a beaut. But it was actually shared by a guy.
But it's just, oh my gosh, I get so sick of fighting with people over that. They're so hateful.
Yeah. And I have really close family members that are in, like homosexual families with children,
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't have a problem with it, and now that I have been exposed to a new way of interpreting the scriptures,
Yeah.
I have no more excuses. And it really, really bothers me. But I also don't give them, I don't give them a special star. I don't think we should discriminate against immigrants or Chinese people or Mexicans or atheists or Muslims or I don't put them in a special category. I think that everybody should be left alone to live freely however they want to live. But I just how easily they throw homosexuals away. That's really, I guess, it's one thing if it is somebody that lives outside your boundary, but when they're your neighbor or they go to your church, we had a gay guy that used to play drums and begged him to come back and but I just know that he's so uncomfortable from just the looks, people can't keep their faces to themselves, and I don't know. I like the word affirming because I think it's perfect because Jesus was affirming, and I would like to be affirmed. Why shouldn't I be affirmed too? It's the same sacrifice, same blood, same cross that affirmed me when I didn't deserve it. So why shouldn't they be affirmed too? It's just, I don't have to have a theological seminary debate. I can just tell you to shut the hell up. And if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything. Just shut up.
Yeah. And I think it's crazy again, how twisted religion has twisted Jesus's message. Because it was obviously all about loving and serving. And you think of even, he knew Judas was going to turn him in to be executed and he still washed his feet. And you can't just be cool with gay people. Like, it's insane. It's insane. And the idea, and the whole time when Jesus was on earth, he was fighting with the religious people about stop taking your scriptures so literally that it's making you hurt people and just love and serve people. And we've gone right back to that and people don't see it. And I think with the Christian anarchists, I think a lot of them want to replace, they've gotten rid of the state, but they haven't gotten rid of the fear or the need of somebody to be in charge and make up the rules. And so they put religion in that place. And it's, it won't come after you with guns, but it can certainly be very damaging.
Can I tell you an embarrassing story about me with this subject?
Please do.
Because my views have changed a lot about this. Now, back in the day, I was against gay marriage. I thought the ban on gay marriage was right, and we needed to. Well, when the Supreme Court came out and ruled that the ban on gay marriage was unconstitutional, I got on Facebook immediately and said, well, Jesus is coming back soon. That's it. That's the end of it right now. Here comes Jesus. That's the last straw. He ain't going to put up with this one. He ain't come back yet.
Um, I've got a lot of stuff to be concerned about in my daily life. You know, I've got truck drivers that I'm responsible for. I've got a business. I've got my own stuff, my wife, my family. Um, I just don't have all that much time to be in everybody else's business.
Yeah.
You know, it's exhausting, you know, and I'm glad that, like, when I got Jesus Untangled, I loved it because it confirmed a lot of stuff that I was already thinking, and he just did a better job of putting it into words. And then when I started to read Jesus Unbound, I'm like, well, I've heard this before at church, you know. And then Jesus Unbound, I'm like, oh, my pastor's taught about this. And then Jesus Undefeated. Have you read that one yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got them, but I have not read them yet. The only one I've read is Jesus Untangled. Well, I know y'all told me I need to read. The one that's very interesting to me is the false, what is it? The false doctrine of eternal torment.
Yeah.
I really want to read that one because, man, and I'm starting to kind of warm up to the universalist type thinking, like what Abby talks about. But man, if I'd have heard that back when I was, you know, ingrained with Southern Baptists, I thought they were crazy. But it kind of makes sense, you know, when you talk about if it's God's will that all men should be saved. I mean, it's God's will.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue it.
Isn't it amazing how we have so easily twisted the word all?
Yeah.
All. I don't know what part of all y'all don't understand, but see, what's been fascinating is since I got to have, you know, I have a more than just pastor relationship with my pastor. We were friends, you know, and so there's been a lot of private conversations that we've had just sitting around shooting the breeze, and we would talk about, well, what if? I mean, because if you start walking down this path of looking at the entire Bible from Genesis to the maps and using Jesus as the lens to properly interpret that, and then you take into the history and the context, it naturally leads you to that place where at least you're willing to question everything. And so we'd had conversations about, well, what if this means that? And what if, you know, hell is this? And what if it's not, you know? And it's been so freeing to have those conversations where I can never say that I'll know. I won't know. It's not possible for me to know.
I used to walk around and terrified that my family members were going straight to hell and we're going to burn forever. I used to walk around terrified about it, you know. And
I remember in high school sending out blast emails to my non-Christian friends telling them about Jesus. Like, it's super embarrassing. They were probably like, oh my gosh.
What if you leave church today and die in a car wreck? Are you saved? Are you going to go to, are you saved? What if you left church?
Yeah.
Man, the fire and brimstone preaching is so, nobody wants to hear that garbage. That's not what Jesus walked around talking about. He said, love your neighbor, love your enemy. That's it. It's so simple when we made it so confusing that people are afraid of the idea of warming up to Jesus.
Exactly.
You know, because they don't know what they're seeing as Christianity is not what Christianity is. The early church, if they were here alive today, they'd walk into church and not even recognize it as a church. Go read some of the stuff that these guys wrote to the Romans and compare it to how the church is today. They would not recognize this at all.
Again, being so driven by fear, like I was terrified, and the idea that loving people meant changing their mind so they believe everything the exact same way that you do. And when I'm not afraid of anyone going to hell, I can just like love people for exactly who they are. Like, it's so much easier to see
it's
people.
a lot less stressful, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not stressed out about it anymore.
Yeah.
The one thing that, as I was exploring a lot of these ideas that kept coming back to, was Jesus saying, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. That's a game changer, you know, but we just, my whole Christian life, we just blew past that. There's nothing about the life of Jesus that says to me, I'm going to roast you for eternity. It's not there. It just, and so I was talking to Paul White, came to our church and did three services, and he's just phenomenal. But he and I were talking after one of the services, and I said, "Is it an oversimplification to say that the old covenant was them telling us who they thought God was, and Jesus telling us who God is?" And he was like, "Well, maybe simplified, but that was it." And he said, "Look, when I'm studying the old covenant, if I can't find Jesus in it, I don't trust it." So I guess that breaks up the fallibility of the scripture, argument. But if you can't find Jesus in it, and what's amazing, my pastor did and I've got to get him to redo this. It's called Grace 101, and he started in Genesis and just verse by verse on Wednesday nights, just started rolling through all the different chapters of the books in the old covenant and pointing out the types and shadows, and here was Jesus, and here was Jesus in the garden. Here was Jesus with Cain and Abel. Here was Jesus, all the way through. It was just fantastic. And there's actually one episode, I think, where he was talking about the judges. And he called me one day and he was asking me about anarchy. And I said, anarchy doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers. Y'all, I'll be damned if like that night at church, he didn't drop that description on them when he was talking about the structure of the law and the judges, because there was no king. It was a whole thing leading up to Samuel. We wanted a king. God's like, you don't need a king. And so there was these judges, and he just says, he writes anarchy up on the board. Anarchy doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers. And I'm like, that's my guy right there. But if I can't see the kingdom in it, I don't trust it. And I just can't see it. I can't logically reconcile back up, especially if you take all of the prophecies and you put them on 70 AD where they belong, and all of that stuff is now behind me instead of in front of me. Mm-hmm. You take all that fear away, and the only thing left is eternal damnation. It don't pass the smell test. It doesn't make any sense.
Not anymore. And I'll tell you one thing that my views have been changed on is the rapture, stuff like that. I used to drive around, he says, look for me when I'm coming. So I'd drive around looking for Jesus to come out of the clouds at any minute, and just, we're all going to disappear. Our clothes are going to hit the ground and we're going to fly up to heaven, and a lot of the debates, like the theological debates that go on, like in the anarcho Christian group, I stay out of. It's above my head. It goes over my head. I don't understand it, and it turns into arguments. But one thing that's where my mind was changed about the rapture and the end times and stuff like that. And it's another one of those things I don't stress about anymore. Yeah. You don't get saved. What if he comes back? You're not going back to heaven with us. You're going to be stuck here, and the Antichrist is going to come after you and murder everybody. It just doesn't work that way. It's so Jesus is. His teachings are so simple, and we've confused it.
Right.
Yeah.
And how many times the Bible says to not be afraid, and then we built this religion based on fear of all the things God's going to do to us. God who looks nothing like Jesus. Totally.
That's what like when people were freaking out about the COVID thing, and I was thinking, man, like people don't die every day of something. Every year, everybody's going to die. Y'all act like this is the end of the world or something.
Right. But or that our existence on earth is just to be safe. Just to be safe and live as long as I can. That's my purpose on earth. And it's like, oh my gosh, people being locked in their houses, being terrified, not seeing their family. It's like, what is the point of being alive if you've taken away everything that makes you human?
Well, which one I was telling you when we were talking to Keith Giles, I had a friend say, so you're just sitting around waiting to die? No, come on. Once I became unafraid of dying, when I was not fearing it, I was actually able to start living.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The only thing that I worry about when I die, I need somebody to take care of my cats. If I go before my cats, I need somebody to take care of my cats for me because that's all I'm worried about. I'm looking forward to going to see Jesus. Doesn't mean I want to die today, but I'm looking
Right.
forward to it. I can't
Yeah.
wait.
Well, the state has become that religion. You know, the politicians are the priests and the military is the savior. And, you know, you said something about it being Flag Day, and I didn't even know that.
I didn't know it was Flag Day either. And I was going on rants last night about the flags. And I had no idea it was Flag Day. And somebody sent me a text, or she goes, if you would put like hashtag 2020 Flag Day, that would draw more audience to your Facebook. I said, is it Flag Day? She said, yeah. And I said, that's hilarious. I've been going off the rails about this since last night. I had no idea it was Flag Day. Somebody tried to tell me the Confederate flag is more of a symbol of freedom. I said, it's a symbol of the state.
Yeah.
I said, you know, they was like, it's not a symbol of slavery. I said, I don't know, man. I said, the way I see it, the Confederate flag is just another symbol of government.
Well, to me, they're both a symbol of slavery.
Absolutely.
Know, especially when, you know, when you point out to someone, you know, if you say, go Google Francis Bellamy, you know, and they're like, who's that? Just do it. I dare you. You know, do it. And then you get that deer in the headlights look.
Pride in them.
Yeah. And they're like, wait a minute, he was a socialist? Yeah. He was a socialist Baptist minister. And, you know, and then show them the picture of the Bellamy salute, you know, and then they're really freaked out.
I got in a debate with somebody the other day. They're like far left. And they posted something about the Confederate flag. We need to get rid of this. It's a symbol of slavery. And I got on there. I felt like being snarky. So I got on there and I was like, I'm with you. I said, but did you know the United States flag is also a symbol of slavery? No, that's the national flag. And I said, well, the Confederate flag was considered a national flag at one time too. Well, it's a slavery. I said, so is the United States flag. And then immediately, without even trying to have a conversation with me, I was a racist. I mean, every one of them started calling me a racist. So I was like, wait, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
But I'm just giving you something else to look at too. You're a racist. Are we going to have an adult conversation? Go. Then I think someone started blocking me. They just kept calling me racist. I finally I was like, whatever. Y'all go have fun with that. If it makes you happy to have stupid conversations, go right ahead.
Yeah. Have you seen the Dave Chappelle special that he did a few days ago? I've
heard something about it. Like it's something.
I watched it last night, and Dave makes, you know, a lot of points, you know, like Dave Chappelle does, you know, in his way. And I didn't see anything fundamentally wrong with what he said. I appreciated his take, especially probably the main thing, him saying, why do you give a damn what celebrities think? You know, he's like, the streets are telling you what they need to tell you right now. You don't need me. You know, you don't need me to say anything. And without saying, he's like, there's a whole other bunch of people y'all don't need to hear from either.
I love Dave Chappelle. I love his comedy.
But as I look at this situation, yes, there is a problem of race, and you cannot deny it. Okay.
But what's the source of it, though? That's what people are not paying attention to. What is the source of racism?
To me, it's my belief and opinion that the state has managed to take something that is relatively small in people that actually have a hatred in their heart for people with dark skin, you know, and they're out there, they exist, but they have exacerbated this system, the war on drugs, the war on poverty, the things that they do to these people that are, you know, they're poor and they're predominantly black in the, you know, these neighborhoods. The Serial podcast did a season where they went into a courthouse and followed people around, and it's just infuriating what they do to people, because once you're ensnared in that system, it's almost impossible to get out. And there's just a lot of black people that have gotten caught up in that, and it's because of the interference of the state. And then they're the ones that are going to end up having the contact with the enforcement system because they have broken whatever rule. And I remember listening to that season of Serial, and at one point I was like, why don't they just move? I mean, just go out in the country somewhere, just leave that. But then I was like, oh, why should they have to move? Why don't the psychopaths, why don't they move? Why can't they just be left alone to live where they want to live without this systematic problem that has race as a component? And so I don't need to join the tribe, and I don't need to protest with them, but y'all, I'm trying to take down the state, and I perform my daily life as if there isn't a state, and I had this conversation with my kids because I've told them, I don't know, 6,500 times, to do the laundry and the dishes and stuff. And so I was making breakfast the other morning, big biscuits and gravy and, potatoes and eggs and all this stuff. So my wife gets herself and the baby a plate, and my daughter gets a plate. And then my son, the 10-year-old, I've got a big skillet full of eggs, and I walk up to him, and he's got no plate, no silverware. And I'm like, hey, buddy, what's missing from this picture? And he's like, I don't know, and I'm like, well, would you like me to put the eggs like right on the table? And he's like, oh, I need a plate. So he goes and gets himself one. I still don't have one because I've been cooking. And I'm like, okay, I'll get my own. So we sat down, and I said, look, here's what I'm trying to get y'all to understand. I do not believe that I should, as your parent, raise you with a fear. I don't want you making decisions based on punishment, because that's not how I make decisions on a daily basis. I don't make any of my decisions based on whether or not I may or may not get punished. Now, if I have to take the Xbox and throw it in the river, it won't hurt me a bit, So if I have to take the television off the wall, I'll do that. But I'm trying to get y'all to understand that you can be aware of what's going on around you. You can look at people, see, Dad's cooking a big breakfast. Maybe I ought to carry my ass in there and get some plates and silver, because I don't want to be that authoritarian, but that's what we're told, well, do good so you don't get bad. That's not who I want to be as a parent, so I guess I just have to keep having the conversation over and over again. Because I guess I could just be a tyrant, and every time you do something I don't like, punish you. But then what am I creating as an adult? Someone that only makes good decisions because they're afraid they're going to get punished, and it's such a hard cycle.
Incapable of making decisions. They've never been taught to make decisions. They've been taught to follow authority. Yeah.
And I told my daughter, I said, look, I have authority over you because I'm responsible for you. Mm-hmm. You can't, at this point, you don't have a car, you don't have a job, you don't have money. You can't take care of yourself. You're my responsibility. Therefore, I have authority. But I have to begin to let go of that authority, which means I have to give you those skills little by little to take care of yourself. And then the more you can take care of yourself, the less you need my authority. But we've completely inverted that in society, that we're turning adults into children that have to be told by daddy what to do and when to do, and don't go out and wear a mask and wash your hands. And, these signs in New York, wash your hands. I'm thinking,
who hasn't been washing their hands this whole time? I saw something so we've so now that we've taught people how to wash their hands like they're supposed to, next week we're going to work on shapes and colors.
Well, I've been around a lot of truck drivers in my day, and there's a bunch of them that could probably use a lesson on hand washing and other things, as well. But it's just been fascinating to be on the road this whole time and watching and being in 11 states. And, I mean, I've probably had contact with hundreds of thousands of people, um, I should probably be dead by now after having to sit in a floor in a truck stop in Dallas and eat my breakfast because I couldn't sit in a damn chair, so I had to sit in the floor. That makes perfect sense.
Right.
But going to all these places and really seeing the disobedience everywhere, seeing the disobedience of people having their businesses open and walking around without a mask. And
I've loved that part, especially after this all started. You'd see people, I'd be on the way to work and people are standing in front yards with their neighbors, not 6 feet apart. They're standing there face to face talking. Kids are out flying kites. People are jogging, walking their dogs. I loved it. I saw this going on. And there's a playground on my way to work too and it's got all these monkey bars and stuff. Well, they've got it wrapped up in caution tape, like keeping them. I was like, come on, man, let them play on this stuff. There's soccer fields on the way to work. There's signs posted, that the soccer fields were closed. Well, they've opened them back up on the way to work. These girls are out there playing soccer now, but I don't know. People are just they're just going to tell the government to get bent.
Well,
leave us the hell alone.
If there is an argument to be made for there being nefarious motives behind, George Floyd and the protests and the riots and all that stuff, there were a lot of those red-blooded patriotic Americans that were watching mothers get arrested for taking their kids to the park, that were really beginning to ask a lot of difficult questions. Well, that shit got shut down pretty quick, I don't know.
I think it was in Colorado. Actually, a guy got arrested in a park for playing catch with his daughter.
Yeah.
Well, think about what that's doing to the kids, seeing their father being handcuffed because he was playing catch with you.
Yeah. That's the thing. This next generation, we've made fun of millennials for a long time, and sometimes
I'm a millennial technically.
some for good reason,
When I moved to Memphis, I had to buy a washer and dryer, and when the washer came with some Tide Pods, and I'm like, it was right after all that stuff happened. I was like, look,
came with a snack.
Well, yeah, Lowe's is delivering snacks with their washers and dryers now. Who's eating detergent? I don't understand this.
I was born in 1976, and I remember the first color television. I remember the first remote control. I remember some of those firsts, having cable television for the first time and satellite TV. And, and these kids are growing up immersed in this technology. And if you think for a minute that they're not looking around right now and have these world-class communication devices with all of the information ever known to man at the end of their fingertips, that they're not looking around right now and taking some notes. Yeah, it might take 5 years for it to really click. But
this
the
what
revolution
the government's doing right now with that aspect, what the government's doing right now, this is going to backfire on them eventually.
Big time.
They have screwed this up so bad that this is going to backfire with the younger generation. They're not going to put up with this ever again. I promise you.
No,
I'm glad that they screwed this up so bad that our kid, the younger kids and stuff, when they're growing up, they're gonna be like, no, I'm going to the park. I'm going to go play. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to a restaurant and eat.
I've got a quick-witted 10-year-old in the other room, and he's going to be a fantastic comedian someday because he's looking around and, he's dropping completely inappropriate one-liners at all the, all the wrong places. But
I wonder where he got that from.
Well, maybe the apple didn't fall far from the tree. But, I was nervous for about a week. I'm like, well, I guess this could be real. So I washed my hands, sang happy birthday for about a week, and then I'm like, nope, I'm not buying it. And I've just continued to go on about my life. And I know statistically speaking, there's a whole lot more things that have the potential to injure or kill me than the supposed disease. And so I'm not going to apologize for exercising liberty because liberty must be exercised in order to be preserved. The minute you stop exercising it, it's over. And I've just decided that I'm going to tell people at every opportunity to go ahead and exercise it. What are they going to do? Put us all in jail? I joined this Facebook group. There's an independent journalist named Jack Windsor in Columbus, Ohio, has done a pretty good job of covering all this stuff. And so there's a fan club for him. And, people are like, what do we do? I'm like, ignore them. Well, we've got to end these orders. I'm like, why don't you just act like they don't exist? Well, who's going to do something? You're going to do something. So just ignore them. But bless their hearts, they don't know how to handle that. Well, you mean I break the rules? Well, I'm really good at breaking the rules. That's kind of a habit of mine.
We're probably breaking rules right now that we don't know exist. There's so many laws that you don't even know what's legal anymore.
What's that? Well, there's like a children's book, 3 felonies a day. Everything I want to do is illegal. So it's just, I love having conversations like this because they're not just, people that are gathered around the same altar, and well, we just got to get all of our guys in charge. And no, we can have peaceful conversations with each other, and we can laugh and cut up and have a good time. And, but we're not talking to our neighbors. We're letting Fox News and CNN control the dialogue. That's a really stupid thing to do, but just around here, I live out in the country now, but our family's closer than it's ever been, just because we're all living through this, and we've had more meaningful conversations, and, our church has been meeting for about a month now. And the first week there was like one guy with a mask, and then since then, nothing. And we passed the Baptist church on the way to our church, and they're requiring masks and temperature checks before you go in, and here comes all the muzzled, walking up the street. And I'm just looking over going, thank God I don't go to that church, so freedom's fun.
I haven't been to church in quite some time. I've been, one thing I've noticed with our project, there seems to be some kind of, like an Anabaptist influence along the way with a lot of people I've talked to. Mm-hmm. Like we got an episode that we had in relationship with Bruxy Cavey. He's got a huge church in Canada, and he's Anabaptist. And there's one about 30 minutes from me down in Mississippi that I've been thinking about checking out, but I've heard they're not all the same. But as far as the Anabaptists and their views on the state, it's pretty much along the lines of how anarchists or Christian anarchists are acting. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of want to check it out, but I don't want to go to church and sit there and get preached to about tithing. I'm not going to listen to that garbage anymore. I'm happy to give, but I don't want to hear about your new PA system or sending your kids to church camp. We're supposed to be giving that money to the needy. That's one thing that I love so much about Keith Giles and his home churches, is that 100% of the offering goes to those in need. That's exactly what they told us to do. That's what Jesus told us to do. That's what they instructed us to do. Not go buy a giant PA system and church camps and all that stuff. Now give that money that's needed.
I'm working on, I haven't got this really put together because, at our church, we use a live band. And the great thing is, in this day and age, $5,000 will buy what $500,000 would buy 15 years ago, as far as technology, lights, computers, streaming, all that kind of stuff.
You remember when the flat screen TVs first came out, how expensive they were?
Yeah.
Man, you can get a 40-inch flat screen TV at Walmart for a couple $100 now.
Oh yeah. We just bought an 86-inch for the church to use for the thing on the wall, for like the presentation, that I don't know, it's probably $1,000, it's just freaking monster. Okay. But I wanted to play that out real quick. If I wanted to play music, I would have to play in a bar, which is fine, but the schedule sucks. You know, if I wanted to have an outlet for that creativity, I would never get to do it. Right. So if you go to the voluntary side of it and say, well, we're going to get together and play music. All right, great. All right. We're going to do songs about our faith. Okay, awesome. Well, maybe other people will want to come too. Okay, well, let's go to a location. Well, we need some basic PA equipment. Okay, well, we got you know what I mean? We can, there's a reasonable way to do this stuff, especially now with the technology, because it's so stupid cheap. That you can literally broadcast all over the world with a $1,500 streaming device, you know, and it's free, you know, beyond that. So while I believe that the mission of the church should be caring for, you know, the widows and orphans, I don't have a, you know, which, you know, we're in a position, we got a paid for building, you know, so that's huge, you know, that our building doesn't cost anything except keeping the lights on and mowing the grass. And so by those standards, we got a pretty low cost of operations, and we have a big ministry budget. But I'm not ready to condemn a church that has a building no more than I would condemn a bar owner that has a bar. I mean, it's private property. You know what I mean? And so, you know, if Joel Osteen wants to buy a stadium and people come voluntarily, well, I don't give a damn. You know, it don't hurt me, you know, although I do find it hilarious that everybody criticizes Joel Osteen, but the same people won't criticize Pat Robertson. Yeah. Give me 1,000 Joel Osteens to one Pat Robertson or Franklin Graham. You know, I don't know.
Well, I think the difference is, to what degree is it voluntary if somebody is manipulating you with, you know, if you give money to the church so that we can have a stadium, that's what God wants from you. That like goes toward your salvation, that kind of deal.
Right.
I think that's the difference. Like, yeah, I don't have a problem with people getting together and wanting to play music and, you know, do whatever. But when, yeah, a pastor's up there guilt tripping you that you need to give money to that, even though that's not maybe what you care about. I remember
if they were more transparent with it, with the money. So I don't know how your church is, but a lot of the churches I've been, they're not very transparent with where the money's going. And I think that's where my problem comes from. It. If I knew where that my tithe was going to, all right, then I'd be all right with it. But I don't really ever know.
Yeah. Or kind of like taxes. If you could say like, okay, I'm okay with paying for food stamps, but I'm not okay with paying for war. That kind of thing, if you could have control. But yeah, when we went to this church in Phoenix, a very long time ago, and let's see, I only had one kid back then, so he was probably about 2. And we were like super poor. Mark was working nights and I was in college and working on the weekends. And the church, like, membership had gone down, and I guess they owned this big like empty plot of land right next to the church. And every single Sunday, the pastor would talk about how we all needed to give more. We needed to up our tithes, or they were going to have to sell their empty plot of land. And we didn't want them to sell their empty plot of land because they could do something with it someday. And I'm sitting there like, okay, I'm sitting here like struggling to pay rent and eating ramen every day, and I'm supposed to give you money so you don't have to sell your dirt lot. Like, sell it. I don't care.
Right.
Need my money to keep your lot. Yeah. So stuff like that. And I would also, just since we're complaining about church, the last time I went to church, so I used to go to this church in the city that I really loved. It was awesome. It was more like a mega church, but the pastor was just amazing. Like, all the people there were amazing, but really it was very like diverse and multicultural, and they were really good at like talking about like elevating above politics, not getting stuck on the right or the left. And they talked about a lot of racial issues and stuff. And they were very much into serving the community that was there. So it was really good. So I didn't realize how spoiled I was. And then we moved out here to the middle of nowhere, and there's like 2 main churches in town. And the first one we went to, we really liked it was a husband and wife pastor team, and we got pretty close to them. But then like the church, the like board leadership decided that they didn't want them to be the pastors anymore. And they made it very clear they didn't want any input from the congregation. And we're saying, if you disagree with this decision, you're not hearing from the Holy Spirit, you're hearing from something else. So we were like, all right, we're done with that church. And then so we tried the other church in town, which it doesn't call itself a Baptist church anymore, but it used to be Baptist. And so there was a lot of things, like they don't blatantly say women are not allowed to preach, but it's clear that women are not allowed to preach. And so anyways, a lot of stuff like that. But the last sermon that I went to, that I was like audibly groaning and saying, I just can't do this anymore. It was talking about the parable of the weeds and the wheat, which I talked about in one of my articles. And that's kind of where that came from, because I was so mad about how he interpreted it. But he basically said, we the Christians are the wheat and the non-Christians are the weeds. And we wish we could destroy the weeds. But this parable is telling us that we have to wait for God to destroy the weeds. So we just have to get along with them for now. And maybe there's some weeds in the congregation today, but we just have to wait, and God's going to destroy them all one day. And I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. This is not the gospel. I am not going to go out and say that if people don't believe the same as me, they're weeds. Like, give me a break. So I haven't gone to church in years.
Well, I can tell you that if I would not have stumbled into Jamie's church by accident, I would have been out by now,
Yeah.
And I'm just thankful that I had someone who, and he came from the mega church background. I mean, his dad built a church of 2,500 people, big multi-million-dollar facility. But to what Craig was saying, it was run very transparently. And when he retired, that whole place was paid for. It's like $1 million in the bank, and they did big, like they would bring in tractor trailers at Thanksgiving, and people would line up around the building and they give out turkeys and so they did big ministry projects. And the guy that came in after he retired was just cult of personality, and but I'm in struggling, trying to embrace this new understanding of human liberty. And I'm thinking, my brain, like the Spirit's saying, I know where this comes from, but I couldn't find that at church, and then stumbled into Jamie's church, and I've watched him change and grow throughout this, and he'll look at you and say, listen, if you find something that I preached 20 years ago, just burn it, and so he's got a guy named Jamie Englehart, Paul White, Nathan Blouse, and Dr. Lynn Hiles. And they're kind of like his mentors, and they have a little accountability there. And so, Englehart and Hiles and Paul White and Nathan Blouse will come through, once a year. And Englehart has a book called Myths and Mistranslations, which is just fantastic, because he goes through all that nonsense that we were taught, just like you were talking about with that. And he just blows it out of the water. And so it's like being introduced to those guys like Keith, which we had a plan to have Keith at our church in October. Who knows where that's going to be after all this stuff. But church should be a place where we're challenging our ideals. That's why it should be there, not what it has become in America. It should be the place where we challenge ourselves, and we ask really difficult questions. Yeah. That's what we should be doing, but that's not what it's become. Now it's, well, if you ask a question, you might be doubting the pastor, and I'm like, well, who's he? You know, what if he's an idiot? You know, that's a real possibility. What if he's stupid? You know, but you can't, you know, then now you've created a state inside your church, you know, so it's just fun and fascinating and I enjoy it, but you know, our streaming numbers are growing more and more as people, you know, because he's a great teacher, you know, and he breaks things down and so
maybe I'll just start watching your church online then, and I can just sit here at home.
Yeah, why not? I mean, this technology gives us that ability to connect. That's what the kingdom's supposed to be about anyway. It's about connection, you know. So doesn't matter that you're not in the same building. I love but I like the house church idea too, because I ain't gonna lie, that 4 or 5 weeks the church was shut down. I like sleeping in on Sunday mornings, you know.
Oh, that's the worst for me because I work overnight. I get off around 4 o'clock in the morning, and when we were working 7 days a week, we started tapering off a little bit, but there was no way I was going to get up and go to church on Sunday morning, getting up, you know, going to sleep at 5 or 6 in the morning, taking a nap and getting up and going. Because I've tried it, and then when I catch myself zoning out in church, I'm not even paying attention. I'm just there, you know. You know, the church I was trying to go to here in Collierville, the reason I picked them is because of the music. I don't know if that was the reason I decided to stay, because the first day I was there, they played a Johnny Cash song, and it's that whole Memphis type of music, bluesy, you know, stuff. And they played
Boy Named Sue.
No, it was Ain't No Grave.
Oh, okay.
And Hold Me Down. And she played that, and this girl could wail, and I was like, I found me a church. That was the last time I heard the Johnny Cash song. But I mean, the music was great, but I just couldn't get
music is you can't deny that music is a great marketing tool, you know. And so
that's one thing, you know, we had planned to go to Nashville, like an anarcho Christian meetup in Nashville. I was going to go next month anyway. And we set up like a meetup, and several people were going to meet in Nashville from that group. But with everything been shut down, I told Steven, I was like, man, I said, we may need to cancel this or just postpone it until a later date. I said, because if I can't go to Nashville and listen to music, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
I don't want to hang out in my hotel room. I want to go listen to some country music, because it's all down there. You know, they got an Alan Jackson bar I want to go hang out at. I want to go, but if I can't do it, I'm not going to go. I'll just wait. And Brock, he wrote for our blog as well. He said he lives in Fayetteville, where I moved here from, but he goes, how about we just postpone it to like football season, and then we can go to a Tennessee Titan game or Nashville Predator hockey match, and when they do the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll just sit down. I was like, that sounds like fun. Let's see how many fights we can start doing that. I went to a baseball game one time, and me and a buddy were talking, and they were doing the Pledge of Allegiance, or doing whatever their song they sing is, the national anthem. And me and him were just talking. We'd been drinking all day, so we didn't care what was going on. And we were talking. This guy's like, would y'all shut up and pay attention to what's going on and put your hand over your heart? And I looked at him and was like, and then back then I was like, yeah, that was wrong of me. I should be saluting the flag and worshiping the sky cloth.
I went to
SeaWorld. Sorry, we went to SeaWorld, and they, like, before they let you in, they play the national anthem. And gosh, I don't even know, that it was several years ago. And my mother-in-law was with us, and we're all just standing there, and she nudges my oldest, and she's like, put your hand on your heart. You live in the greatest country in the world. And I'm like, that doesn't mean you have to worship the government. He's just standing there without his hand on his heart. Like, good for you.
My sister, my Christmas present in 2000 was a ticket to the Daytona 500. So I was at the Daytona 500 on February 18th, 2001, when Dale Earnhardt died. So in the fall, or in the summer, I happened to get a load to Florida, and I called my best friend, and I'm like, dude, Daytona. So we went to the July 4th weekend race at Daytona, and we basically had no supplies. So we stopped. We bought like ham, cheese, bread, beer, some shorts, flip-flops, you know. So we got there at like noon. So we started drinking like noon. race didn't start till 7. So we were plowed, by the time it even started. So we're sitting in the stands, and pre-race ceremony is getting ready to start. And my friend Don, he's like, man, I'm hungry. And I'm like, well, go get something to eat. And so at the pre-race ceremony start, so, everybody stands up. Of course, it's 2001. I'm all in. And they're doing the national anthem, and I've got my hand on my heart, and I'm standing there, but Don's nowhere around. And I look over, and he's a big dude, hammered, walking down the stage with a Domino's pizza box in one hand, a piece of pizza in his mouth, and his hand over his heart. And I'm like, that's dedication to the flag right there, my friend.
Oh, man.
I
told my
sound like a lot like my friends.
Well, I told my best friend Zeke, he and I have had we got to be friends by accident in like 2013 and have talked on the phone every day since. And so when I first, I was dabbling with anarchy when I met him, and he came from a super fundamentalist black background, and then I got introduced to Grace, and so we've walked together, talking to everybody to bounce the ideas to each other. And we've said a time or two, sometimes wouldn't it be nice to go back, just because it was so easy to be in with the crowd, instead of being the contrarian.
Times.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, I don't even know how long this has gone, but it's been a blast, and I've loved every minute of it, but we probably ought to shut it down. Y'all do it some more. I would, matter of fact, I would love to do stuff like this because we get to interact on Facebook and in the groups and stuff, and that's fun, but man, conversation's where it's at. That's why I think Joe Rogan is so popular, not because he's a genius, because he sits down and people have conversation.
That's what we're trying to do with our podcast. We try not to script any of the the interviews, which we're just having a conversation, like we're sitting down having a beer or a cup of coffee, and it's worked out really well. We just kind of feed off each other. But this has been fun. I didn't know what to expect. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this. First time I've been on this side of the mic, actually.
Well, you were good at it. You did good. You didn't sound like an idiot ever at one time. You didn't even have any uncomfortable pauses.
Wow. Huh. I need to work on that.
Well, listen, guys, it was fun.
Can I plug something real quick?
Go ahead. Absolutely.
This is a pretty big week for the Bad Roman project. We've got we were working with Feld Kingdoms with Ari Spivey and Brian Grant about doing some music specific for our podcast, and they knocked it out of the park. They got a Bad Roman track, and we're going to debut that this week with our interview with them. I think it'll probably drop Thursday or Friday. Also, with that episode, we're going to be promoting a new Bad Roman store with some Bad Roman swag. So we're pretty excited about that as well. So check it out.
I need y'all to educate me on proper marketing for your podcast, because I think y'all done it right.
Well, that's all Quinn, man. I mean, that's Quinn. I tell you, when I found her, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I found her on Upwork, and she's so creative and so detailed that she does all this for us. She does all the promotion and the artwork and all that stuff. The editing, handles the website. So that's her. I mean, if you're looking for somebody,
our articles.
Yeah, she helps with the articles. And the guy that I interviewed yesterday, he was asking me about our website. He goes, "Man, that website's way better than any of mine." And I was like, when I told him about Quinn, he goes, "Was she looking to take on any more clients?" And I asked her, and she said, "Not right now. She's just too busy." But she said maybe in a couple of months. But if you're needing something like that, Chris, maybe just check out Upwork. That's where I found her, and just put on there what you need, and they'll be able. You'll find somebody. What was so impressive about Quinn is she sent me stuff to read whenever she made an offer, and she sent me, kind of what to expect when we're going to be doing a podcast. Like, we're going to have to start a blog. I was like, "What is a blog?" We have to start a website. I just want to get behind a mic and holler at people. So that's all I wanted to do. I mean, it just turned in a whole lot more than I expected, man. And we're having a blast. Everybody that's involved has been really cool. And just the help that everybody's doing has been awesome, because I couldn't do it without any of them. It's been fun.
All right. Good deal, guys. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you.
Hey, if you're
Later,
ever
Summer.
driving through Memphis with all the millions of miles, holler at me, man. The barbecue is as advertised here. It's delicious.
I will stop for barbecue. Ain't no doubt
There's
about
a
that.
place, it looks like a little hole in the wall. It's called Central Barbecue in Midtown Memphis, man. It's one of the first places I went when I moved here, and it's delicious. I mean, big old rack of ribs. It's delicious.
I like it. Well, I like the scenery out where Abby is a little more.
Oh, I know. See
You
some
know,
of
I love
Memphis is dirty.
Colorado.
Memphis is filthy, but like the stuff she posts on Facebook, I was like, man, I've never been to Colorado. I need to go check out Colorado.
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
It looks very beautiful.
Yeah. All right, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, stop that.